adequate heat in there before next winter. So we've been making little improvements as we have money for it, and as the Friends of Crane Meadows have been helping out with that as well. Upcoming things that are happening at the refuge. Tomorrow night we actually have our volunteer banquet to recognize those that have been volunteering at the refuge. We have a pretty good volunteer base that helps us out with a lot of projects since we don't have very much staff there. And so we're going to be recognizing those folks that put time in. And then on May 11th we have a bird walk from 8 to 10. That's something that we do annually, just an opportunity to get out and see the refuge and learn more about birds. There's binoculars and stuff like that available. And then the Friends are sponsoring a Platte River cleanup. Annually they try to do a little canoe trip down the river, a stretch of river to do cleanup. That's in June, but we don't have exact dates set yet. So you can check on the website as we get that closer. And then the main reason I'm here today is May 7th we have a proposed hunt plan. Our proposed hunt plan, we're going to have an open house at the Sedge Meadow Classroom on the refuge, and this will be kind of to kick off our public review and comment period, which is from May 1st to May 30th. And that news release that I provided you, that's the information about that proposed hunt plan, and then where you can get the information. That information will be available after May 1st. For public comment. And what's involved with that is there's a draft environmental assessment that was done, a draft hunt plan, and a draft compatibility determination. The compatibility determination basically is that every use on a refuge we have to go through a process to make sure that it's compatible with the refuge purpose. And so hunting is something that we have to do to approve to be able to determine if that's compatible. And so not all refuges aren't open to hunting until they go through that process. The changes that we're doing in this news release, or in this proposed hunt plan, is that the last hunt plan was done in 2010, and at that time there was only 3 refuge units. I believe there's 13 or 14 units that make up a little over 2,000 acres that we have now. But at that time there was only 3 refuge units that totaled about 1,200 acres that were open to hunting, but those were only for managed hunts for youth and persons with disabilities. So this change will be opening more of the whole entire refuge open to hunting, but there'll be some areas that are still going to be only open to special hunts, and it's just because of the safety aspect, like the Crane Meadows headquarters unit, where there's trails and stuff like that. We're going to maintain that open for special hunts like youth and disabled. And then there will be about half of those units, like 6 units, I believe, that will be open right away, and the other 6, I believe, or 6 more, I believe, that will be open after they've been surveyed. So we're in a process of still getting some of these lands surveyed, and but this will get us to further along, and it'll be easier to open those areas once that survey is done. I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of this opening, and it'll be in the news. There'll be news media or news releases coming out to the newspapers, and so if there's any comments or thoughts, the public has the opportunity to comment. And that's all I have.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a quick question? Is there a presentation? It says it's from 5 to 7. Is there a presentation at that open house, or is it more just come in at your leisure? Yeah,
there won't be any presentation. It'll just be for public to come in, and if they have questions or concerns or they want to discuss or learn more, we'll just be answering questions as we get them, and there's really not going to be anything more. We'll have a map on of the refuge up, and that'll probably be about it. So, but the comments will be available, or the documents will be available as of May 1st. So they'll have a few days to have looked at it before that open house.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve, what time was that bird walk on
8 to 10 on May 11th. And, if you have the opportunity to come out, if it's a beautiful day, it's a great time to bring kids, grandkids, family, whatever, out to the refuge and get them out and see the refuge.
So you get to see birds?
Well, hopefully.
I've been there a lot, and I've never not seen birds, so
yeah.
Don't know if that's possible.
Anything else, gentlemen?
It's always good to have you here.
Yep, it's good update, Steve. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoy the week.
Yep, you too.
Camp Ripley.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
General.
Well, good morning. I'm Lowell Cruz. I'm the senior commander at Camp Ripley, and I have the privilege of joining you again today and giving you our annual update to where we've been this last year at Camp Ripley, what our activities look like, and what we anticipate for the coming year. So if you have any questions at all inside of what I'm briefing, please yell at me, throw something, staplers work, that kind of thing. So the first slide you're seeing right here is my mission statement. It hasn't changed from the past. You've seen it before. My job is to have an installation that is the best installation to train your National Guard at. And besides that, we also train other elements of the DoD, and as well as a lot of civilian agency partners from the state of Minnesota. And we continue to grow in that avenue, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the other part of my mission is to ensure that I am the best neighbor I can to my community. And that's why we do these briefings, so that we can continue to do that public outreach that we need to do as we sell the story of what Camp Ripley does and who we are. So next slide. So last year I talked about change in the Minnesota National Guard leadership. The good news is our leadership hasn't changed any this year. I'm still here. General Jensen is still the adjutant general. One thing I am briefing on this note right here, though, is Colonel Brian Melton is my garrison commander. Brian's been attached to the 34th Infantry Division headquarters, and so he's been in the country of Jordan all this last year as part of the deployment. We have about 700 of our division headquarters over in what we call Army Central Command, headquartered in Kuwait, but a portion of them are up in Jordan helping with the activities against ISIS up there and helping train the Jordanian army as well. And Brian is leading that team up there and doing a very good job. And finally, my CSM, Matt Erickson's entering his third year as being my Command Sergeant Major. This will be his last year in that. So by next spring, we'll be announcing a new Command Sergeant Major that's working for us as our senior NCO. Next slide. So our economic impact is very similar to other years you've seen. We continue to average around $130 million of direct income. Majority of that is payroll, as well as construction dollars, and some, depending on the year, some make-up money is included in that as well. When we run that through a factor, we still think we contribute to your community around $300 million annually, and this year we were close to that again. I don't see that changing significantly for 19. Our construction projects that were very large that started in 17 are starting to wrap up, and so we'll have some new construction, but not quite as much as we're experiencing right now in the installation. Next slide, please. So 2018 was a very busy year for us, and I would tell you that your National Guard is busy year-round now. We used to spend a lot of time in the summer going to summer camp, and maybe a weekend a month was the normal. Your guardsmen right now have that schedule. It used to be about 48 days of commitment a year, is now averaging 50 to 60 for most of your National Guardsmen. And that's due to the high op tempo that we are in. And people ask me why that is the case, and I would tell you that overall your Army is too small nationally for all the national commitments we have. So the Army has to use the National Guard. Most of your National Guard units are in a 4 to 5 year rotation, where every 4 or 5 years they can count on deploying somewhere. And so right now the division headquarters being deployed is an example of that, as well as the Armor Brigade Combat Team is prepping in the middle of that cycle, and they'll deploy in 2 years, but they've got some significant events that are going to occur next year and this year to support that. And so a lot of training every year, and it ramps up a higher commitment every year till you get to that deployment year. And so as a force, we're starting to see some of that stress. So you've got community members that are starting to be under some stress because of that, due to friction with their employers, as well as friction with their families, competing against the demand that we're asking them to provide as they provide their service to their country. So this last year in 2018, we had about 383,000 man days of military training at Camp Ripley. That stays fairly steady, or that stays pretty steady. But once again, we grew our numbers of man days of civilian agency training there up to 56,000 this last year, and that continues to see every month we find a new element in state government that wants to come and use our facilities as some kind of a conference or training site, and so we're starting to work through that. We're very proud of the award that our environmental team won this last year. They won the DOD level, so not National Guard, not Army, but Department of Defense, fighting against all the major installations for cultural resource management. They won that because they've completed the cultural resource survey of the whole installation, all 56,000 acres. We have identified every area that we think could be culturally sensitive, and those are identified, which allows us then to eliminate those areas that potentially as development areas, or understand that we got to do more detailed analysis of those areas before we do anything in those areas. Part of that documentation was documenting all the Indian remain mounds that dot our riverbank along the Mississippi, as well as some in-depth cultural preservation of the old Fort Ripley site, which is, and we're starting to do a little bit of interpretation work there as well, so that we can educate our soldiers on what Fort Ripley was like back in the 1850s. The reserve was there in August for about a month. We had about 1,500 reservists as part of the CSTX exercise. What's significant about that is there's 5,000 reservists over in Fort McCoy and 1,500 at Camp Ripley, and they spend 3 weeks moving supplies and convoys between the two locations, training on all those logistical tasks that often our logisticians don't get a chance to do. We also were the site to host some international individuals as well. The Chief of Staff of the Swedish Army was there last May, as well as the Croatian ambassador. And finally, we hosted our first ultra 50K marathon run around the installation. So we had about 20 people that completed a 50-kilometer race inside of our installation. Next slide. So we still have some new construction going on. On the right side of this slide, you'll see one of the new buildings. The 4 buildings listed there are all the buildings that were being replaced from the 2016 tornado. Those buildings are going to be complete this summer, and they're really going to bring some amazing capacity compared to the buildings that went down. And so the investment that the Army has made into creating new facilities there for those replacements is awesome for us, and it's going to give us some great capability. On the left is the example of the new buildings that we're putting up to replace our tin row huts. So as we have a master plan that has us replacing all the tin huts probably over about a 30-year period, and we're working in that by billeting area, and our area, what we call our Area 5, we hope to get complete here in the next 5 to 6 years, and they'll all be these long, what we call long houses, which are the inside of that. Under that roof are probably 6 to 8 individual bays that probably can house about 5 to 10 soldiers each. So we're excited about that. Next slide. Other projects on the installation, if you go to our PX, you'll find that the interior's been completely redone, refreshed. New checkout areas and stuff like that to make it a little more convenient for our soldiers, but it really gave a fresh coat of paint on something, makes it look pretty good, and the PX is part of that process. Future projects down there on the bottom, the top 2 are associated with our growing fire department. The HEM building is a maintenance facility, a 6-bay maintenance facility that's been on the installation for probably 30 years. It's getting completely redone to house all our fire equipment. It'll be heated and climate controlled, and beside that, we're going to build a actual fire station that'll contain the building and the admin space for our fire department. And if you didn't know, our fire department now is on a 24/7 schedule, 7 days a week. And what's important about that is we recently signed an MOA with the local fire departments, and my boss, General Jensen, has agreed to allow us to respond off the installation as well. So we've created a lot more coverage for your your county's fire response, specifically along 371 and up into the Fort Ripley area, and that I think we're probably the most responsive piece into that area for you. And so with that fire department on 24/7, that gives you 4 firefighters that are ready to respond to any kind of emergency most of the time, and that'll grow as we train our fire department and add people to those schedules. We're also expanding our simulations footprint. The SAMT is another building that we're going to build this next year. The Army is getting into virtual reality simulations, and so this building will allow soldiers in a squad level to wear virtual reality headsets and maneuver inside that building as if they were maneuvering in terrain. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, and I hope someday that I can demo that to you as well. And finally, we're finishing up some of our long-term plan to become energy self-sufficient. The next phase of that is to buy electrical upgrades and a SCADA computer system that will then link our solar field with our backup generators that we've now installed at all our substations and give us the ability to go on and off the net or the electrical grid as needed. Next slide. So other years I gave you a month-by-month breakdown of the numbers and who was coming to Camp Ripley. I really thought the most important portion of that speech was the numbers and the volume, as well as anything significant inside of that. And so you'll see that May is a very busy month for us, and it's indicative of what your National Guard is under for training right now. As an example, we had armor units that were qualifying their tanks this last January and February. And so activity that we used to do predominantly in the summer is now occurring year-round. Our May is an example of that. That's probably 11,000 military is almost every soldier in the Minnesota National Guard will rotate through Camp Ripley for a period of time in May, as well as we'll host the Boy Scout Jamboree in May as well. June, July, and August will be busy months for us for noise production, but I would tell you that we're at a level now of training year-round that we're pretty constant in noise production with our heavy weapons firing. But you'll see some more artillery firing in June and July, as well as more aviation traffic in July and August. The 2nd Brigade Combat Team is coming from Iowa to Camp Ripley to conduct their XCTC, and that is a 3-week exercise that prepares them to go to JRTC, the Joint Training Readiness Center down in Louisiana, and they'll go there next year. And so they got to practice all the tasks that they'll have to do for that evaluation this year. What's significant about that for the 2nd Brigade is they are an infantry brigade combat team that's an air assault brigade. And so they'll spend a lot of time in helicopters over that 3-week period doing air assaults, so hence more helicopter traffic for your public at that point. And then finally, as we roll into the fall, our fall is our busy season for our civilian agency partners, specifically our State Patrol, and a lot of our law enforcement agencies do all their in-service training in the fall, and that's indicative of the large numbers you see in October, as well as the DOT snowplow driver training in October. So the level of our activity is pretty constant, and will be about the same this year. Next slide. Of course, in the air, we continue to have the C-130s from our 2 air wings that are stationed here in Minnesota continuing to do their training on a weekly basis. Normally Tuesday through Friday, you can find C-130s swirling around Camp Ripley in the afternoons. That activity revolves around them practicing landings on our main 6,000-foot air runway, but also on the gravel strip that is next to it, the expeditionary strip. And that expeditionary strip is important to us because we're one of the few airfields that have that. And C-130s would come all the way from Arizona or California to practice landing on that as they prepare to go to Afghanistan for support. And the ground forces of those air wings use our buildings and our ground facilities no different than their Army National Guard brother. So, next slide. And I love to highlight the fact that we have permanently stationed state agency partners on the installation as well. The DNR and the State Patrol have stationed their staff for their law enforcement academies. The State Patrol is in the middle of their academy right now. It started in January. They'll graduate here in May, and sometime in May, the DNR Academy will start. And so for us, it's a kind of a constant cycle of state agency cadets at the installation as well. And then HSEM conducts on almost a monthly basis some emergency management training in the Emergency Management Training Center. And then, as I highlighted before, the fall is the time where we see several hundred MnDOT snowplow drivers doing their annual training events as well. Our environmental program, I highlighted a little bit in the 2018 activities, but we're continuing to be award winning, and you can see on the left there, they compete almost annually for some type of award. Most of those awards they can't win back to back, so they got to find another category to go compete in, and more than likely they can beat any installation in the United States because of it. So I would tell you that, of anything to be proud of the fact that we have some of the best wildlife and land management resources in the DoD inventory, and those specialists and those subject matter experts work for me and work for you as part of your Camp Ripley environmental team. On the right there, you can see all the different years that we've been working on trying to continue to be greener in our activities in regards to electricity, water, and other resources that we need to start guarding. And all the electricity products drive towards the ability to be a zero consumer of resources and electricity in the future. So, next slide. I like to tell people that with lots of good environmental programs comes a lot of environmental oversight, and I would tell you that we have a lot of agencies that come and regulate Camp Ripley, but from the county all the way up to the DoD national level, and very important. Now, and I would tell you we wouldn't win any of those awards if we were out of compliance with any of those agencies. And so it's self-assuring to me that we are in compliance and we're doing a good job environmentally for our activities. Finally, our environmental partnerships are the heart of why we win a lot of those awards environmentally. And so our relationships with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Board and Water, soil resources, and more importantly, our opportunities to provide internships to Central Lakes College and St. Cloud University are pivotal to that effort. Every summer I see probably a dozen internships that show up on my installation, and we have a lot of young budding college kids that can't wait to graduate and hopefully compete to come back to Camp Ripley to work for us full-time on our environmental team. So it's a sought-after position, and it's what continues to make us young, vibrant, and strong in the environmental programs as well. Next slide. Finally, some opportunities for you to interact with the installation. I would tell you the first one's probably the most important one on this is the open house, which will occur the third weekend in September on Sunday. We historically have always every other year opened our gates and had an open house in which we allow the public to come in and see our equipment and meet our soldiers and that. This year is significant in the fact that Charles Kapsner is finishing the Air Force painting for the committal hall at the Veterans Cemetery, and so we're doing that reveal of that painting in my open house all in one day. We've asked the Air Force to come and make it a big day, and so you'll see more. You'll see some actual flyovers of a F-16 as well as some flyovers of other aircraft. We're trying to get some commemorative aircraft in for that event, and more importantly, we're trying to get some bigwig generals on the Air Force side to come and celebrate the fact that we're entering the year of the 100th anniversary of the Minnesota Air National Guard as they fielded and became the 109th Observations Squadron in 1920. So please put that on your schedule. Please come and join us, and please help us make the last painting for the Veterans Cemetery a big deal. And I'd ask you to come and join us. Other events that are important to us here in a week or two, we'll participate in the annual Morrison County Earth Day, in which we'll have a lot of our members down in Little Falls here supporting the school kids as they do Earth Day projects around your community. The Morrison County Water Festival is an event put on by my environmental team where we have a lot of school children come to Camp Ripley and learn about water quality and why having swamps is a good thing sometimes. And finally, you know, on the bottom there, we love to highlight our opportunities for our disabled American veterans and our veterans for hunting and fishing events as well. So, next slide. We started about 3 weeks ago doing some prescribed burns. Once again, we have about 14,000 acres that we need to burn. The snow that we got 2 weeks ago kind of put a stop to that for a while. I'm hoping the team can get out this week and pick up where they left off. We got a lot to burn in a short amount of time before it greens up. Why that's important is all the stuff in yellow is stuff we want to burn before training sets it on fire. And then I can control it and make sure that it's safe. There's a lot of land that's involved with our ranges in that we have to burn off. And then the stuff in red on the map there is environmental burns, things that we want to burn that off to control the vegetation in some manner. And so you'll see some burns associated with that as well. We're hoping that I'm hoping that we can get that all done by the first part of May here. So next slide. And finally, we like to highlight what we do inside of the ACUB and the Sentinel Landscape program. You'll see in 2018 there in the middle, we added several $1 million again total from the federal government, as well as some matching funds out of the Lachard Heritage Foundation. That money went into a project with the city of Baxter for a environmental or a walking forest next to one of their elementary schools on the south end of Baxter, right up against the Crow Wing River. Great project for us to be able to secure some more land in that area and put it into a perpetual easement that allows us to ensure that we won't have encroachment. And that's important around that whole perimeter Camp Ripley. And so as you look at the map, the stuff in red is stuff that we've already got established ACUB easements on. The stuff in green is what we call compatible land that we don't have to worry about an easement because it's in some kind of use that's compatible. And finally, the stuff in pink is landowners that have identified that they're interested in enrolling their land if they get the opportunity. All that opportunity is based on the budget every year and what kind of money shakes out of the DOD at the end of the year. Typically, you know, we don't have a lot of budget inside of ACUB at the beginning of the year, and by the end of the year, the Army's looking for ways to execute its dollars, and that becomes very attractive to them at the end of the year. So that's why we normally see $2 to $3 million sometimes in that project per year. So, next slide. And that, gentlemen, ladies, is the end of my update. I'll take any questions that you have or concerns, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
If I may, General, you brought up last time we met about these huts that you were selling, or how are you getting rid of your huts from?
Yes, sir.
How are you doing?
Well, tin hut sales averaged about $300 to $500 a tin hut. And we probably sold a couple dozen of them already. I've got some more that need to go on the market here coming up. The Army makes a point that it doesn't allow me to keep buildings when we've replaced them, and so I have to demo them in some manner, and so it seems to be a pretty good way of getting rid of them, and the community's kind of responded to it. So,
Gentlemen, anything else?
I would just like to make a statement. It's not only does Camp Ripley provide an economic impact to Morrison County that is unbelievable, but it especially General Cruz, he's willing to make the community a better place. He's willing to let his guys go out to help on a house fire or the EMS or mutual aid agreements with all the local fire departments in the city. And Camp Ripley also brings wonderful people into our community to live, to have their kids go to our schools, and they're a wonderful partnership, and we're very lucky to have you.
So yeah, we've got some ideas going forward. I met with the Little Falls community development folks 2 or 3 months ago, trying to talk about daycare issues inside of the community. I don't have any immediate solutions to that, but there's some ideas of what we could do in the future with some state and funding as well that might help us solve some of that as well. So, and I'm excited to see the effort being put forward at the legislative level right now for the Minnesota Military Museum and potentially a combined fishing museum located together someplace. Both those museums have a need to grow and have a need for a new facility, and it just makes, common sense and money sense to combine the two if we can. So I'm hoping that grows some legs as well. So.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mr. Zelinski.
Without a doubt, General, thank you for keeping us informed. And that's what today is about. Yep. And I very much appreciate that. But I want to piggyback just a little bit off of Commissioner Lemire. I know that it's taken a long time for you, for your staff, from high command down to, let's call it the boots on the ground, to get your EMS staff, your fire staff to come off base. I just want to say that compliments not only Camp Ripley, but does it ever compliment Morrison County. There's a critical event, incident that takes place within reason, of course, and to see Gold Cross or Mail Transport, I guess I forgot their new name now, and or fire crews that specify Camp Ripley on the side of their vehicle responding to an event, quite honestly, is second to none.
Yep.
We can talk about aircraft all day long, because I can. I love it. Every time that there's an aircraft that goes over my house, which is a routine basis, I love it. It's that freedom sound to me. And the other portion is the civilian training that takes place at Camp Ripley. I mean, if we go back 50 years ago, first of all, that was unheard of, and we know that. But the civilian training that goes on at Camp Ripley today is second to none. That could not happen without people like yourself. I applaud you. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Wilson.
you are a big part of our community, and we thank you for all you do and all the involvement you do with all of us. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, yeah.
Commissioner Blaine.
Well, I just, when you say a big part of our community, with 53,000 acres, you're a big part of our county.
Actually, when I look at the map, I think Morrison County would have been square if it wasn't for Ripley.
Yeah, well, thank you for expanding our horizons that way. I just, General, I want to thank you for your straightforward and common sense approach to this board in dealing with issues and programs that we can work together on, and I want you to know that this board does not underestimate the value of Camp Ripley to this county and to the people of Morrison County and this region. We applaud you for the work that you do and the communication that you keep with us. And so thank you.
Anything else, gentlemen? General?
No, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I'll be back next year, hopefully, but every day is a job interview, so we'll see. Yeah. But that being said, somebody will be here next year, and Camp Ripley's not going anywhere. We will continue to pump the money we do pump into your community, and we want to be the best partner we can in that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Great River Regional Library, if you'd like to have a chair there, the mics are out. You're special.
Every guest is special.
Not that you're going to take any extra time or nothing.
But we were deciding we should have asked you to have the meeting outside. It's so nice up there. You haven't been out this morning.
And please state your name for the record.
Good morning. I'm Karen Humsack, Executive Director for Great River Regional Library. I have with me Cindy Brugenthies, who oversees our Little Falls and Swanville locations, and Terry Deal Hansen, who is our coordinator out in Royalton.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for the time today to talk about how your library system is serving your community. So we're really excited to share with you an overview of some of the activities from the last year. Great River Regional Library, as you likely know, is a 6-county library system. We have 32 locations with a physical library. We also have a locker system out at the community center in Sartell. We have over 8,000 borrowers. If you go to the next slide, you can see that we have a pretty good presence here in Morrison County. Of the 6 counties, Morrison County has the 3rd most libraries out of all of the partners. We have 5 libraries in this county, which is pretty significant. Little Falls is the largest here in town, but all of those other locations are very well used as well. And just the 5 locations that you have there, we had over 92,000 people through the door, we estimated last year. This is a picture of our experiment out in Sartell. We're just sharing the information because it is a pilot project that Great River entered into a partnership with the city of Sartell about 1.5 years ago. It's a 3-year pilot, and their community center is newly constructed. It's open from like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. And this is in a space that's not staffed. So if you look at that locker system, what happens is people will come in and use the self-checkout on the left. They scan their library card, and it checks out the materials to them from the locker. So they place requests just like you would at any library for the materials that you want, but it's all self-service. And then we deliver materials there 2 days a week and pick up from the book drop 4 of the days that we're there. So if you have questions about how that's working, we just wanted to let people know that it's going on. Mr. Winter is chair of our board this year, and he's been very helpful in helping move this project forward and keeping the conversations going about what library service might look like in the future. You can see our statistics around checkouts haven't changed a whole lot. We still see only about 6% of our total circulation in our digital materials right now. It's still a pretty expensive collection to maintain, but we continue to invest in it because we have a lot of people asking for those services. That being said, physical books are our primary source of business activity still. We also conducted a survey in partnership with St. Cloud State University last year, just in terms of measuring our customer satisfaction across the region. And we asked our users, what services do you use at the library? 88% said they still are using physical books, which was interesting because you hear a lot about how the world's moving to digital, but the reason people come to the library is still books. And we can't forget that. The other interesting statistic we saw was 26% of our users are saying they're using the digital collection, but we're not seeing that reflected in our activity levels. So that's something we'll be exploring as part of our strategic plan in the next year. We are at the end of our 5-year cycle, so we're beginning that strategic planning cycle this year into next year. And Cindy and Terry will tell you a little bit about our library programming at the local level and other things that are going on locally. We reached over 11,000 kids through summer reading program last year, but how that looks in each community is very different.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the what's going on in Little Falls and the Swanville libraries. One of the things that Karen had mentioned at the locker system is they have a self-checkout. We also have a self-checkout in Little Falls. And I did see that our circulation statistics are up, even though we had such great weather in February. I do believe some of that is in regard to the self-checkout machine because people are busy, but they can come in, pick up their holds, and check out. They don't have to wait in line. They can have everything they want ready for them because people are busy. But we also have a lot of programming going on, and I do want to just invite anybody who has time to take a look at our programming website, www.griver.org. And we have programs for babies, we have programs for adults, we have programs for children. In fact, we do have the summer reading program coming up. And it's one of the things that we really get a large participation from in Little Falls and Swanville.
So in Royalton, as Cindy mentioned, we're kind of gearing up for the summer reading program, which runs June 10th through August 10th, and that's when we just get bustling with kids, and it's an awesome time. We have some local supporters. The Royalton Dairy Queen offers free dilly bars for the kids who bring in a reading coupon. Our locally grown fundraiser in April has been, we're working for funds to get summer reading program prizes for that program as well. We have, Royalton is going to be getting a new gazebo in their Memorial Park this year, and so we're collaborating with the city and the Friends of the Library Group, and the library will be providing some music through our legacy funding. A musical group will be performing in the gazebo, and then the Friends of the Library will be giving out hot dogs and beverages and things, so kind of making it a fun city event and all working together with that. The Royalton Lions Club and the Royalton Firefighters donated funds so we could have the 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten program, which is an early literacy program, and they provided funding for 80 children. We currently have 42, so we're doing a good job of getting that promoted as well.
Do you have other programs you want to mention?
I did want to, I could mention, I made a list of them yesterday, and the list started to get pretty long, but some of the things that we had last year that were really great, we had the Minnesota Zoomobile at the Little Falls Library. We had Sestry, the singing group at the Little Falls Library. We had the Raptor program where they brought raptors from the Minnesota Zoo, and that was a standing room only program. We had great author programs last year. And one of the things that we've got coming up this year is called Let's Talk About It, which is a collaboration between Hands of Hope, the League of Minnesota Poets, and Break the Silence. And they're going to be presenting on a book of poems called Upon Waiting. 58 Voices Speak Out from the Shadows. This is a program on stopping domestic abuse. So we're going to be having that this summer. I didn't write down the date, I'm sorry. But I think that it's an important thing for us to be talking about, and it's one of the things that the library wants to do is bring important topics out to the community and have things at the library that people are interested in. So I did want to say, too, our very own Laura Hansen, who works at the library, is a contributor to the book, and the Upon Waiting title comes from Laura's poem. So she's doing a great job with bringing a lot of excellent writers into the library.
So thank you for your support of Great River Regional Library. I did include in the packet an overview of the statistics for the whole region and the Minnesota Library Association platform. There are a couple of active bills at the legislature around state library funding right now. One is regional library basic system support was included at the $3.6 million level at an increase for state funding at the $3.6 million level in the House Education Bill. It has not been included in the Senate Education Bill at this point, so we're hopeful that within conference committee we can see that move forward, because that particular bill would stabilize the formula. It would increase total amount for public libraries across the entire state, but it would also give us a calculation date that's fairly a little earlier, so we would actually have that number before we set our budget, which would be helpful. The other thing it does is our telecommunications aid, the language was written in the 20th century before things like Wi-Fi hotspots and locations like Sartell. And so we're very limited in how we use our telecommunications funding right now to specific hardware, software, network requirements. And the language in the bill would allow us to use, if there's funding left after the basic needs are met, to use it for more of those 21st century projects. So something like circulating Wi-Fi hotspots, which is something we will be experimenting with in Piers fairly soon. We've donated funds would be something we could maybe use our state funding for if that moves forward. Representative Ron Cretia was actually was the main House author on that bill, so we really appreciate his support in trying to move that forward. We're just hopeful that they can come to some type of compromise that favors libraries by the end of session. The other bill that's moving forward is for state library legacy funds to be reappropriated. And that looks like it should be moving forward both in the House and the Senate. So we're hopeful that that will continue to be on track. That needs to be reappropriated every 2 years. It's not a guarantee that we would receive library funding at the library, or legacy funding at the library without that appropriation. So keep an eye on that if you're interested in legacy funds. And with that, if you have any other questions about any of the materials or things going on at the
Have
library.
any questions at all?
Just a great
I know
system.
just a little bit to be dangerous about this checkout system. So if I go there and check out a library and you say locker system and then you get the book, how do I get my book? You know, why wouldn't it get mixed up with someone else's, or could you kind of explain that?
There's a whole system. We use a system called Horizon, which is the integrated library system that is on every staff computer throughout the whole system. So if you place a hold at the Royalton Library to pick something up at Sartell, everybody in the system can see how that works. And then if the book is on the shelf in Little Falls, Cindy's staff will pull it, put it in the delivery. We have 5-day-a-week delivery between all of the library locations. That goes into St. Cloud, gets sorted into a bag, and it's put in the Sartell section. So we actually have a processing spot behind the scenes at the St. Cloud Library for the Sartell location. Otherwise, most of that happens
Learn
outside of the
something new
library.
every day about it.
Yeah, it's a finely tuned system. We can get something from Staples to Delano, which is as far north and south as we go, within 2 to 3 days. But we're also part of a statewide interlibrary loan network. St. Cloud is the hub for St. Cloud State, St. Cloud Tech, and St. John, St. Ben. So we actually, as part of our delivery infrastructure, receive deliveries from the University of Minnesota from the statewide interlibrary loan system. So if there's a book on the shelf in Thief River Falls, we can usually get that within a week because of all of the connections between all of the regional library systems and the academics and the publics across the state.
So, Mr. Chair, Karen, is it like it drops your bag of stuff? Is it a mechanical system in this, or how does?
Sartell, it's
Yeah.
all manual.
It's manual, okay.
Yep. All of the lockers are assigned in St. Cloud.
Okay.
And then they can see if somebody's checked something out from behind the scenes. They can see if those lockers are empty, and then they can reassign those to a specific patron. And then our driver goes out and he knows which lockers go with which patron, and they load those right into the locker themselves.
So it's not really a pre-assigned box that you have. It's just your stuff will be in box 3, and you go in and you open box 3, and there it is, and you take it.
Right.
Okay.
Right, those boxes change. We do 2-day-a-week delivery, and there's 44 lockers, so we can serve up to 88 individual patrons if everybody picks up in between, but that's not
Yep.
typically how it
Interesting.
goes out.
Again, I think it's a great system, that locker system. I kind of knew a little bit what you're telling me, but I just wanted to let the other board members, how it is that it can be utilized where you can get a book from, like you said, Thief River Falls, if it's not in our system, where everybody has that access to, hey, you might not get it right away, but in a week or less, you have it. So, again, you guys do a great job at Great River, all the libraries, and again, I'm right in there in the, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, it makes no difference, but like I say, it's something that I think everybody should get on the board eventually, as it is, it's just, your perception is totally different once you get in there, so, and I'm a great supporter of the library, so I think it's very important for our community, and again, all the work that everybody does, so I think it's a great thing, so, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Have a good week.
You too, thank you.
Thank you.
MCIT. I guess we got something passed out. Yeah, please, if you'd like to, either one, state your name and everything for the record. Yeah, and then you go right ahead, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very kindly.
Tyler, you got one, right?
I did send an electronic version, but I don't know if that got voted up or...
And, yep, I got it.
Okay, perfect. There it is. Well, good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for putting us on your busy schedule, your agenda this morning. My name is Don Doraskovich. I am your risk management consultant at MCIT, which is Minnesota County's Intergovernmental Trust. I replaced Jane Henniger, who you might remember as your risk management consultant, who just retired this past month. My background is in the traditional insurance marketplace. I've spent 30 years as both an underwriter and a broker for traditional commercial insurance. I also have about 5 years of experience handling municipal liability for the League of Minnesota Cities, which you might be familiar with. I will try not to read word for word from the report, but kind of touch on the highlights and updates for it. We have kind of a condensed version this year. If you might remember, it used to be several pages long, and we've condensed that down. As you might be aware, MCIT is not an insurance company. What we are, we're a joint power risk sharing pool that provides property, liability, workers' comp, risk management, and loss control services to help reduce losses. Our membership includes about 81 of the 87 counties in Minnesota. There's about a handful, 6, that are not members. Just because they're so large, they self-insure. So they've decided to kind of handle their coverage on their own by themselves. We also cover about 350 ancillary type non-county members, such as soil and water conservation districts and ag societies. We also cover county libraries, who were just here before me speaking, so we also can cover those also. Our MCIT board consists of county commissioners, auditors, treasurers, and administrators, just like your board. So our board is representative of our county membership. The history of MCIT kind of stems back to the mid-70s. There was a point where counties were having great difficulty trying to find workers' compensation coverage at a reasonable cost. They were also facing companies that just simply didn't want to insure public entities. So a group of commissioners got together and decided to kind of pull their money together and form a pool to pay their own workers' compensation claims. In the mid-1980s, property, liability, and auto coverage was added to that arrangement. So we've kind of grown, it's grown from years past. In 2019, this year, as you can see on the front page, we're celebrating 40 successful years of managing risks together with our members. And the success of that program really stems from the members because they support prevention and risk management strategies. So a lot of that success we're not taking credit for. We're handing it back to our membership because they are the ones, in fact, that have addressed loss concerns and prevention measures. So our success also is a commitment by our members for the acceptance of our program and services not as a commodity. Typically today you hear over the media for coverage to name your price sort of arrangement, and that simply not is what our program is. Our program is representative and designed for county members and their needs, and that's what we respond to. Morrison County, by the way, has been a member of MCIT since 1986. Turning to the second page on the inside cover, on the left margin in the black area, you'll see that there's a discussion about rates, what really has been happening with MCIT rates since 2010. And the good news is, as you can see, rates have gone down. So again, that's a testimonial to our members really addressing risk management concerns and loss safety awareness. So the rates have been able to drop for property and casualty by 30% over those past years. The good news is also is that the workers' compensation rates, as you can see in the yellow, have also dropped more than 32% over that period of time. So we really are encouraged that there is a positive effect upon claims experience, and there's also been some nice reductions in reinsurance costs. So we've been able to maintain a very good product at a very reasonable cost. Some of the advantages of being in a risk-sharing pool instead of having your coverage from an insurance company would be that members share the same type of exposures. So we're covering basically the same kind of risks. The trust has gotten very well at identifying and how best to serve those risks and needs. There's also an effect of economies of scale. Quite a large number of participants. What this also has is an effect of smoothing out peaks and valleys in large catastrophic claims. So your one county member who might have a significant event happen isn't significantly impacted in their rate, say, the next year. It kind of gets spread amongst all the members. So that's a nice effect of having similar type entities in the same risk-sharing pool. There's also an advantage of rate stability. As you can see in the chart here, there's been a couple of years where the rates actually have maintained the same, like 2015, 2016 on property casualty, and oddly enough, 2018, 2019. Because the history and the experience is very predictable, we can say that, you know, the rates are going to remain steady. And what that allows our members to do is to kind of budget for what their future cost might be for next year, knowing that the rate is going to be pretty close to what it was last year. In the green lower box of that black margin, you'll see there's a discussion about dividends. Dividends that are paid for the trust as a whole is shown on the left side as the MCIT total dividend, and then you can see what the dividend was paid to Morrison County just to the right of there. Dividends usually reflect past claim experience and performance of MCIT investments. Again, since MCIT is somewhat like a public entity, we are a joint power. We operate very similar with a board that's representative of county commissioners. Our investments are very similar to what a county investment program would be. So our dividend really is kind of contingent upon what the losses have they been better than average, and if our investment income can support a little bit more than what we expect. Dividends are declared by our board when it finds that it's prudent to do so. Since we've been in existence for 40 years, you can see that we returned a dividend for 28 of those 40 years, so almost every year. There were a few years at the onset where dividends weren't quite appropriate, so they weren't granted. But of recent years, I think most of those 28 years have been the most recent. In the center of the brochure, you'll see that there's a depiction, several circle graphs that discuss claim frequency and claim severity. Again, this is for the trust as a whole. These are not specific statistics just for your county. Because counties differ in their operations, we can't really make a county-to-county comparison. So what we do is we combine it into a whole trust view, so you can see, you know, where the activity has been. I'm just catching up on my notes here. As you can see in the top section of the center of the page there, it talks about claim frequency and claim severity of property and casualty claims. As you can see, most of the claims, both the frequency and the severity, have been on the auto side. So our autos tend to have the most number of claims over that period of time. You'll also see that auto is significant in the most severe or the highest paid amount of claims. So auto really is where we're trying to concentrate our emphasis, our focus on trying to help that out a little bit. The second most severe claim of property and liability has been general liability. Down in the lower part of the graph is a representation of workers' compensation experience and activity, again for the period of 2014 to 2018. Our workers' compensation, oddly enough, shows the same type of claim, both sheriff operations and highway department at 51% of the frequency combined represent 64% of the amount of claims paid. So the workers' compensation reflects those two departments as representing both the most number of claims and the most expensive amount of claims. And that kind of stands to be reasonable because what we find in the sheriff and the highway department are more hazardous type operations, and they tend to be 24-hour operations. So they're busy all the time. There's an exposure there 24/7. So it's not unusual that that is the case. On the lower right, you can see that workers' compensation, I'm sorry, back step here. The pink section in the bottom of the center of the page discusses workers' compensation experience mods. And what workers' compensation experience mod does is it takes the past losses for a member and it compares it against what expected losses should be. Generally, it's for a 3-year window or picture. Now, we discount the last most current year because those losses aren't developed yet. There's still some reserves there. So we take actually the 4 prior years, discounting the most current, and compare what the actual losses for, in this case, the whole trust were against what was expected. And typically what we'll do is the experience modification allows us to adjust the workers' compensation contribution of a member based on its track record, its work comp loss history. So in the event of a member who might have more claims than what was actuarially expected, their modification would be higher. They would pay a higher cost compared to the base rate for coverage. Vice versa, a county member or a member who experiences less than expected workers' compensation loss history would pay less than the base cost of coverage. And what the modification shows and the way it reflects that is if a workers' modification is 1.0, that's neutral. In other words, a member has experienced just about the exact amount of claims that were expected. But if a workers' compensation modification were over 1.0, say a 1.1, 1.2, that would reflect the fact that for that 3-year period, discounting the most current, they've actually experienced more workers' compensation claims than what was actuarially expected. Again, vice versa, if a member should have a workers' compensation modification factor, and our industry just applauds itself on using large, big terms. In other, that is a workers' comp experience mod. If it is less than 1.0, then a member has actually incurred losses that were less than what expected for the class codes, the operations that they insured for workers' compensation.
If I may, Don, you got all these bullet points under the compensation claims. You know, I understand the top 2, but what type of claim would come under other?
That's really a very good question, and that would be claims that really don't fit into those categories that are shown. So,
give me an example. I mean, what?
If there were, say, a water treatment facility, or if there were a type of county operation that we typically don't see in a typical county, that would fall into that other category. You bet. Any other questions this time? Okay, thank you very much. Again, I know coverage and insurance has a lot of acronyms and words and definitions they use on their own, and sometimes it's not easily understood. And I'm trying to help us out here on understanding that as best I can. What we can say on the far right of the middle of the presentation are what are notable enhancements for 2019. these enhancements have been a reflection of, again, what our county membership and related entities have really wanted our board to consider. So in 2019, what we basically increased or added to our coverage were five major areas. The first was an increase in the data compromise Cyber 1 coverage to $100,000, which had been only a $50,000 limit for county members. Our non-county members have a lower limit than that. That was all of these, 4 out of these 5 coverage enhancements were no additional contribution. In other words, the board felt that they didn't see large potential for claim activity in really any of these except for the drone coverage. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Our board also increased the builder's risk limit. This would be for if you were constructing a new building or remodeling an existing building. The building coverage increased to $750,000. It was previously $500,000 for building coverage. And the contents coverage also increased from $150,000 to $100,000 automatically without any increase in cost. So that was a nice feature. Our most emerging and pressing, other than the data compromise in Cyber 1, which has been computer hacking and loss of data of information of clients, customers' information, is the drone coverage. For years, we've always had drone coverage on our liability coverage document for law enforcement activities. So if there were a need to use a drone for that purpose, there always had been emergency liability protection and property protection for the drone itself. What the board has done in January has expanded that to include all your departments. So there's both liability and property coverage for the drone for any of your county's owned drones that are manned by your county employees. Now, what has to happen is they have to be scheduled on your coverage because there's now a separate endorsement to cover drones. So for uses like checking bridges or land use or going out and looking remote areas, rather than having to send personnel out there, you could use a drone. And again, the coverage is full liability for bodily injury and property damage to anything or anyone the drone hits, and actual damage to the physical cost of the drone itself. We're often asked, well, what kind of claims really have we seen on drones? The common one is invasion of privacy. People where the drone passes would say, well, you're coming over my property, I don't want you looking at me, and so forth. So we have seen that sort of thing happen. So just be mindful of use with drones. I think the county does have a drone, and I think it is scheduled. That's a common concern with drones. Moving on, our electronic data processing equipment coverage was enhanced. We dropped some of the sublimit for equipment while in transit or at a temporary location. That means in the past, equipment such as voting equipment that would be either in transport or stored at a separate location in the past had to be separately scheduled. Well, we've done away with that requirement. We've said no matter where your equipment is and when it's in transit, there's coverage. So we no longer have to necessarily schedule off-premise at a temporary location. You'll have just one blanket limit of EDP coverage on your coverage document, and that covers it wherever it is. So that was a nice enhancement. Took away a lot of the administration wrangling of separately scheduling stuff. We also included in the $100,000 limit of extra expense. That includes now your software, so your processing system, your programs, those are now included in the $100,000 limit. That has been increased from $50,000, so there's also a higher limit there. We also took away the need to schedule anything that was over a certain amount of value, like over $50,000. Again, what we're now working with is a blanket one limit total amount of everything that you have for all your departments. And we're currently in a program right now in the month of April from all our members to send us an updated inventory so that we can start fresh and clean with a fresh number. And what we're trying to accomplish is an EDP inventory for your county as a whole instead of separate departments sending separate inventories in. What we're looking for is one inventory for your whole county so that we can identify one large blanket coverage amount for your whole county. That's what we're trying to get done here in April. And we thank you for your assistance with that. The last coverage enhancement we've done is liability coverage for Class 3 dams. Class 3 dams are defined by the Department of Natural Resources as those dams which present the lowest possible hazard downstream. So these would be dams that wouldn't affect a large amount of population should, say, they overflow or fail. In the past, all dams were excluded for coverage. So the board decided this January to pick up Class 3 damage for coverages. And again, this is response to our county members asking for these coverages. They were considered, they were looked at, researched, and it was decided by the board to go ahead and add these coverages to the program. So being very responsive to county needs. Lastly, on the back page, if we flip to the back, the brochure gives us a nice summary of services provided by MCIT. One of my favorite, of course, is the first risk management, being a risk management consultant. So I think that's the best one. That's just personal bias. I, as your risk management consultant, can help respond to coverage questions, liability, and risk management concerns. So what we try to provide are answers to coverage questions and clarification about scheduling things on the property. So should there be any questions whether something is or wouldn't be covered, something that would fall within the realm of what I do at MCIT. So simply an email or a call, I can help folks understand that a little better. We also, as risk management consultants, we review contracts and joint power agreements from a risk management perspective. Risk management perspective means how does it fit with your current coverage? So if you're considering entering a joint power agreement or a contract for services, we can look at that contract and we can give you recommendations about what that contractor should be carrying for coverage so it mirrors your coverage. Because the contractor is doing the coverage for you, they will not be covered under your coverage document. They should have their own coverage. So we can help members know what those contractors should be carrying. We have many resource documents we send out. They clearly explain all of that, and we're more than happy and glad to provide those. Lastly, what we also do is help identify potential risks and provide advice on how to manage those risks. There may be cases where the risks will fit very nicely with the coverage you have, and there may be cases where we might recommend something other than your trust coverage. Pollution coverage is an example. If you get into a construction project or something that involves hazardous substances, our coverage document does not pick that up, so we do recommend that there be outside coverage added for that. So, but we can give advice on those sorts of items. In the center of the consultation services bracket is loss control. And what loss control is designed to do is to kind of prevent losses from happening. They're the safety folks. They'll come out and they'll identify where you might have potential safety or claims concerns, and they'll make some suggestions and recommendations on how to improve that situation. Your loss control consultant here from Morrison County is Nick Lindberg. And as I say, he'll do things as written safety programs. He can help with those. He can help with hazard identification and place safety audits and do reports. He can interpret OSHA standards to help those needs for the work comp side, and he can provide employee injury analysis. Take a look at the kinds of worker or employee claims you've had and maybe suggest some ideas on how to do some things different. Most importantly, loss control consultants participate in safety committees. They conduct employee safety training and can provide loss prevention educational services. An additional resource I'll also want to bring forth is on the right far side of the margin, our employee assistance program. This is a voluntary, no-cost program that allows employees, their family members, to identify maybe some crisis areas that they're having in their life, some difficulties, if they're having work or family issues, and it's impacting their ability to perform or do their position with our member. This program, again, it's aligned with Sand Creek Services. We'll provide professional counselors to help them. Again, completely voluntary and no cost. The nice piece about the employee assistance program is that we've designed it to fit several specific county roles. There's a specific program for elected officials, and there's a specific program for law enforcement people. So the program has evolved into what we feel is very responsive to specific county needs. As you can see in the right banner there in that green box, Morrison County's participation for 2018 was 1.69%. The year before that, it was 3%. So it's difficult to say why that has gone down. It could be that folks are having less difficulties and troubles and there really isn't the need for it. Or there might be the case where more information is needed about the program. And if the latter is true, we can provide that. We have resources, documents, brochures, folks that the county can contact to get that program moving or more involved again if that's what the county decides it thinks it would like to do. Jumping over to the left.
If I may interrupt?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You have a lot of good bullet points here.
Thank you.
We're pressed for a little time.
Okay.
So if you want to.
I'll wrap up here real quick. Almost finished. Sorry. The left side of the blue margin is, again, just some other training type events that we have. Seminars, workshops. Our most recent one will be May 22nd in St. Cloud. We'll do some law enforcement liability management perspectives. That's coming up. We'll do on-site presentations. We'll come out here to your county and present on whatever coverage you might want us to expand on. Our patrol program, modeled after the collaboration of MCIT, LMCIT, and the county police, the Minnesota Police Chief Association. I'm glad to say that Morrison County has 22 folks involved in that program, so that's we appreciate their involvement there. We also have training videos, tutorials, libraries, DVDs that are borrowable, and we also encourage defensive driving programs. That's in conjunction with the Minnesota Safety Council, which our county has a membership in as being a member of MCIT. Very pertinent loss awareness and prevention materials available from our loss control. Nick Lindbergh can provide these to you. Many award-winning materials, deer vehicle collision, quick takes on safety, injury prevention for law enforcement training. Step wisely, this is our slip and fall. Next to auto, slip and falls have been our kind of thorn in our side. We're glad to say several $1 million have been saved by use of these materials. So if your county is not using any of these materials, we really highly recommend that that be considered. Commissioners often ask us what is the best way to help the program and continue the success. We say support safety initiatives in the lower box there on the bottom of the page, attend risk management training that we can do, support and encourage training for employees, and learn how coverage would apply before making a decision. Lastly, we do like to review contracts before you sign them and execute them. Many times they'll come in after the date of the contract being actually enforced, and we find some hiccups and problem areas. We like to point those out and say, we need to take a second look at some of those. With that, I'll wrap up, and on behalf of MCIT's board and service team, we thank you and appreciate Morrison County for your continued membership, support, and participation in the success of our MCIT program. That concludes my report.
Gentlemen, do you have any questions or comments for Don?
Awesome.
All right.
Good
Don,
job.
thank you very much. We appreciate the time, and
My pleasure.
we're going to take 5 right after the sheriff's department. We'll let the sheriff come up.
I have extra reports if you want me to leave them.
I think we're good, guys.
You're good? Okay.
We've got plenty of information here.
Real good. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll put up now, and then we can just reroute through it. Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Morning, Sheriff.
So I'll go through the monthly report for March. And I guess if you look at the screen, we'll just talk about it now, just to keep the board aware of what's going on. As everyone's aware, we have the contract through the city of Randall. You can see January, February, March, April, where we're at. If you look at the total time, we're doing well over our 30 hours that we're supposed to be, that we're committed to. You can see we have patrol time. That's actual patrol time where our deputies are in the city doing traffic enforcement, just being visible. You have another column labeled incident time. That's the time we're actually spent in the city where we're responding to calls for service, doing follow-up, doing investigations, et cetera. So well over the 30 hours. No, we are not getting paid for the extra time there. It's just showing that we're doing our 30 hours in our due diligence.
Mr. Chair, Sheriff, incident time doesn't count. Or does it?
It actually does if we're in the city limits of Randall. So in other words.
At the time?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
So if we
Thank
get a
you.
call for service in the city of Randall, and we're actually, our squad cars there, we're visible and we're there patrolling, yes, it will.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'll just highlight a few things. We'll go to the page where you'll see a dispatcher and a picture of Don Cheetah on the top. And I'll just read this because I put this on Facebook. Not everyone probably has Facebook, but it's kind of an interesting call. So Don Cheetah was injured in a farm accident, and it was July 31st, 2018. And what was interesting is he's working on a tractor, and the tractor actually moved forward and ran over him. So he was actually able to grab his cell phone and call 911. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit into this. He was transported by helicopter to St. Cloud Hospital. He was intubated for 6 days. Okay, and the tractor ran over his left side. He had 12 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, fractured scapula, a clavicle, pelvis, and femur, and 2 vertebrae in his back. He came home August 31st, 7 months later. He continues his recovery, is returning to farming. So he wanted to credit all EMS in Morrison County. Linda Day is our veteran dispatcher in that picture to his left. She's the one who took the 911 call. And he was just so thankful, you know, for everybody. Everybody that responded, and especially her for taking the call and getting all the resources out there. So I thought that was pretty cool to highlight. And he came in and we snapped a picture and we threw it on our Facebook page. So he's as far as I know, he's doing well. He didn't have anything for assistance when he was walking, and he's just happy to be alive and very thankful. The other photo was the Sinuski donation money, and we already discussed that at a previous board meeting where they were actually present. So moving on, we'll skip to our criminal complaint ICRs. That should be the colored graph labeled 87 criminal complaints. And I'll just highlight what's actually going on as far as what's number-wise, I guess. So if you look at the pie chart, and you look at the burnt orange, the lower right quadrant, it's 11%. You'll see that's our disturbing the peace, and we actually received 10 calls. And 8 of those calls were just harassing communication calls, or someone will call and they'll report that so-and-so keeps calling me and they're harassing me. So that's what that is. If you go to the left lower quadrant, the blue pie shape, it says 15%, that's our thefts. We had 13 theft complaints. That's anything from a business theft. It could be a theft from a vehicle, you know, some merchandise inside a vehicle. It could be a theft from a building. A couple of those were 2 gas drive-offs and things in that nature. And then the upper left quadrant, you'll see the green pie shape, and that's at 18%. That's our fraud and scam. So as mentioned, like previously, we still get these scam complaints. Fortunately, a lot of them are, hey, this is the complaint I got. I never gave them my personal information, but we want you to be aware of it. And what we do is we keep track of everything, and if there's something new that comes out, then we want our personnel in Morrison County to be informed. We may do a news release, or we'll put it on our Facebook page. Any questions with any of that? So moving on to our traffic complaints, you'll see our verbal warnings, that purple shade on the bottom. We had 114 verbal warnings. The tan shape, the tan upper left, we had 42 written warnings. And then the blue quadrant to the right of that, upper right, 27 citations for speed. So I looked last month in February, we had 80 citations total, so it's gone up. A couple reasons are, number one, it's getting nicer out, we have more vehicles on the roadway. And number two, we're doing TZD, Towards Zero Deaths. So we're running extra shifts where we're actually looking for speeding, we're looking for people not wearing their seatbelts, we're doing DUI enforcement, and we're also looking at distracted driving.
If I may share, this is my dumb question. Did some law just pass with cell phones, or is that just, was I just thinking of it?
Yes,
Maybe you brought that up or whatever.
so the hands-free cell phone law did pass, but it'll be effective August 1st. So basically what that's gonna mean is that you can no longer be dialing your phone while you're in traffic. You can no longer be answering a phone call unless it's hands-free. In other words, the cell phone should not be in your hands. The only exception, there's an exception for law enforcement in the line of duty if you need to use your phone. And the other exception is if you're gonna make an emergency call. I can tell you that we're looking at it as an agency. We have a Bluetooth package in most of our squad cars. However, the 2015 series and some of the 16 squads out in our fleet don't have that. So we're actually looking at, even though we're exempt, we're still looking at trying to figure out what we can do on that end, because obviously we want to lead by example. We don't want to be on the phone if we don't have to. And if we do, you know, hopefully it can be Bluetooth as well, hands-free.
I'm sure you can get, so like if you're at a stoplight, you can't get on. I know this is coming up, this will be questions, but if you're sitting at a stoplight and you get on your cell phone, I'm assuming you can't do that either, right?
Yeah, so the way the law reads now is it's clearly hands-free, which means you are not supposed to be touching that cell phone, period, unless it's an emergency call. You can use the one-button activation where if you're on your Bluetooth and normally on your steering column, you'll have a button to activate your voice commands, and you can tell your phone to call whomever. You'll be allowed to do that, but it's no more driving in the vehicle where you can actually check your emails, which you're not supposed to do anyway, by the way, but no more calling somebody, activating your phone to call someone, or grabbing it to answer the phone.
Texting.
All that stuff. They do say that, you know, you can still utilize your phone for GPS purposes, but with that being said, obviously you're supposed to program your route before you even take off and go to your destination. And then normally a lot of times it'll be ran off voice commands. So yeah, more to come on that. I know obviously we're trying to do that now with our Towards Zero Deaths where we're doing our extra shifts. If we see somebody doing the distracted driving, we're doing a lot of educating too and advising them about the law and what's going to be taking place August 1st. Good question. Any other questions on the traffic citations? You'll see the 2-year comparison. You can see our total complaints went up a little bit. Our criminal complaints went up. Our non-criminal complaints went down. Our drug investigations, they went down, but I'm going to highlight that a little bit. If you take the totality of the circumstances and you look at the overall drug enforcement that we're doing, the numbers have actually gone up. But when we look at drug investigations, we're talking about sometimes a single person, multiple people that we're actually sometimes buying drugs from through an informant. So those numbers have gone down a little bit, but our drug enforcement efforts have gone up, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Our total inmate count went down just a little bit as well. If you move on to our statistics regarding our jail, you'll see that we averaged 36 inmates from Morrison County during the month of March. Itasca County, we averaged 12. Our total inmate count average is 48 to include all the out-of-county inmates. Any questions on any of that? You'll see U.S. Border Patrol, if we come across somebody and they're illegal and we can prove it, and or the Border Patrol says, hey, we have a hold on them, that's why they're listed. They'll be brought to our facility, and the U.S. Border Patrol will pick them up from that point, and they will ship them to Thief River Falls where they'll have a hearing. So that's why they're listed on here.
Sheriff, if I may, is that an additional income, U.S. Border Patrol? I'm kind of assuming it's not, but I don't know the answer.
That's a good question, Commissioner. It is not, only if we're housing the U.S. Border Patrol people. Now, yes, we're housing them overnight,
Yep.
but they're being picked up the next day and they're being transported.
Okay.
So we will not be getting paid for that.
Very good, thank you.
You'll see the next sheet, just to highlight our out-of-county inmates. We had 28 total for the month of March, and our revenue collected for boarding out-of-county inmates was $21,965. I'll go on to some of our drug activity. So as you're aware, we put on another drug task force officer. That person started in the month of March. So we've been busy doing training for that party, the Morrison County deputy that's been assigned to the Board of Violent Offender Task Force. So really busy with training. However, the person that we got working for us now, that extra person, came off the street with a lot of street smarts and was very good at doing drug interdiction. So we're utilizing that person's skills out in the field right now. So that being said, I'll just highlight a couple things that we've done in the month of March. So from March 5th to March 7th, we assisted multiple warrants in the St. Cloud area. Drug investigation resulted in 5 people being arrested, over 3 pounds of meth, and several firearms seized, as well as $12,000 in cash, with links to Morrison County. On March 11th, we assisted the Violent Offender Task Force with stopping a load car coming from the Metro up I-94 with meth in it. So these are different things where we're utilizing our personnel with drug interdiction skills. On March 21st, there was 2 traffic stops for an investigation into drug trafficking. One vehicle we stopped resulted in a warrant arrest. The second traffic stop resulted in a search of a vehicle gathering intel from 3 known drug users. So these are houses that we're sometimes possibly getting information on, but not enough to do a warrant, where now our guys are doing surveillance on them, and we're waiting for the right time. We're waiting for we see the short-term traffic, and now we're finding probable cause, reasonable suspicion to take these vehicles and make a traffic stop. So that's what we're doing. We're being proactive in that regard. On March 27th, the Central Minnesota Violent Offender Task Force conducted a saturation in the city of Little Falls. We conducted surveillance and traffic stops related to drug activity. The operation resulted in 2 people being arrested for outstanding warrants, both of which are heroin users. And then 1 citation was issued to a third party for driving after revocation, drug paraphernalia, and no insurance. So when I talk about drug investigations and I say our numbers are somewhat low, this is all additional. This is drug enforcement traffic stops. That's why those numbers don't carry over in that column. That makes sense. On March 29th, we assisted the Little Falls Police Department with a narcotic complaint. We searched a vehicle and found a meth pipe. And then on March 31st, we assisted the Morrison County Sheriff's Office investigators with a burglary investigation conducted an interview and gained drug and gun intel that was passed on to Sherburne County. So besides all this information, like I said earlier, we've been really busy with our new drug investigator, just not only introducing him to other agencies, but other counties and going over the protocol and things of that nature. So it's been a busy month. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Good job, Sheriff. Thank you. We'll take
good day.
5, maybe 7.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I have one report right now on the social service side, and given that it is Vulnerable Adult Abuse Awareness Month for May, I thought it'd be nice for Sarah to come in and share a bit of information on what we do with vulnerable adults.
So yes, first, I will let Deb get, no problem. So first, I just wanted to explain, who is a vulnerable adult? What does that mean? So it's a person who's over the age of 18 who meets one of the below criteria. So they're either categorical, which means first they're either a resident of a nursing home, assisted living, adult foster care, or they receive services from a home care provider that offers, provides, and arranges for their personal care assistance. So that's one criteria to be considered a vulnerable adult. Second one is if you're functional, which means the adult possesses a physical or mental infirmity or other physical, mental, or emotional dysfunction. And they have to meet both of these bullet points. So that dysfunction means it impairs their ability to care for themselves. So they can't care for their basic needs, food, clothing, health care, supervision, and based on that impaired functioning, they're unable to protect themselves from maltreatment.
So, excuse me, Mr. Chair, it takes both of them.
Takes both.
Can't do it on just one.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So just the types of maltreatment that is in the statute is physical abuse, emotional, mental abuse, sexual abuse, neglect by a caregiver, self-neglect, or financial exploitation. And so there's two different kinds of financial exploitation. Fiduciary means that person has undertaken to act for and on the vulnerable adult's behalf. So a power of attorney, a guardian. However, it does not have to require legal relationship as if they've chosen to take that on for that vulnerable adult. Or non-fiduciary, they haven't taken on to become that person on their behalf in regards to their financial needs. So the way that vulnerable adult abuse is reported is through the Minnesota Adult Abuse Reporting Center. I know you've heard of this before. It went into effect in July of 2015. What this means is our intake, who you met today, she was here to read the proclamation, or she was here with us to read the proclamation. She does not take the calls for vulnerable adults anymore. It has to go through a state centralized system. And so it is, like I said, it's centralized. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's the phone number. Mandated reporters are also able to go online and make reports through a written form. So it just streamlines that process. And then what happens is they will then send us this report through our system for us to look at, screen, determine if it meets criteria to proceed on an investigation. So this is the graph that shows our adult maltreatment reports. So on the left-hand side, it shows our total number of reports. As you heard in the proclamation in 2018, we received 218 reports. And as you can tell, that's a spike from 2017. I contribute that to awareness. I think we're seeing more awareness about adult abuse. There's more advertising. The state's taking a better look at it. So I think we're going to see these numbers continue to increase. Already for 2019, we have 52 reports. For screened in for investigations, we screened in 43 in 2018, which was up from 30 in 2017, and we've already screened in 13 for 2019. Our screen out rate, we screened out 175 in 2018 and 39 in 2019 so far. So the next graph shows what our screen out rate is. So we have about 80% screen-out rate, 20% screen-in rate. Our highest screen-in rate was back in 2016. It was about 25%. That was right after the introduction of MARC. So I think that increased. They were still working on the reports that those operators were taking. And so we had to screen in more reports because we weren't getting as much information to be able to err on the side of caution. We were, if they met criteria, we were, screening most of those in. So,
Mr. Chair, Sarah, can I ask a question? We still have to do work to be able to screen them out. So it's still a process we go through?
yes. We meet 4 days a week from 8:30 to 9 to look at all the reports that we have received. And then we determine, number one, do they meet that vulnerable adult status? So that's our first thing that we look at. And the state provides us with tools that we are able to use to identify that, and then we look at statute. So first we look at that. Second, then we look at, does it meet the maltreatment criteria according to Minnesota statute? If it meets criteria for maltreatment and it's really on the fence whether or not they're a vulnerable adult, we can screen them in to determine that status in the investigation, which is why in 2016 we saw more screened in reports because the operators through MARC were not doing, lack of a better term, a very good job of telling us their vulnerability. So we were screening more in to determine that. As that system is catching up with itself, they're doing a better job of telling us their impairment. So you're seeing that screen out rate go down a little bit more. However, we are in line with our regional partners. I have checked out our screen out rate and I feel like we're pretty in line with that.
And one more follow-up to that. Is there any type of process that reports back to those that make a report?
Yes, after, in the MARC report, there's a little section that says, do you want a disposition letter in regards to your report? If that person checks yes, then we send them a letter in regards to what happened to the report. Was it screened in, screened out? Sometimes we add little recommendations, follow up with their doctor, ask for a min-choices referral, try to give them some information to help them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, just to go a little further with that, how many people actually are on the team, if you will, that are going to come up with telling me that Greg is categorically, number one, or two, functional? How many people once a week sit around the table and say, yep, we've got this report that says this, that, and the other thing, to make that decision?
So it's me.
Further follow-up.
It's me, the two adult protection investigators, and the intake worker, so 4 of us.
And the reason I say that is, if I read under number 2, the two bullet points, I mean, there's a little leeway. In fact, I'm reading it as there's a lot of them. And you haven't met Greg yet. As just forgive me, as the example. You haven't met Greg, you're just doing this off of a report perhaps that I sent in, I think, and making a determination off of that report that I just sent in. You may never see Greg. Tough. I thank you, because this is to me, an extremely tough position to put the team of 4, whatever the numbers are, in that situation.
Just
I very much,
Just 2 additional points to that. If there is a question too, we also have our county attorney's office we can consult with, because one of the options might be guardianship or some other legal action. But I also think some of the challenges is that for those, when you talk about functional, it's okay for a 90-year-old to live independently. And for some family members, that's difficult to accept, depending upon how well they're doing. And so that's a lot of the conversations, because 90, 95, 100-year-old can live alone, can choose to collect all sorts of things, what we call hoarding. So they're allowed to make those choices. And if they don't meet functional level, it's okay, but it's hard sometimes for family members or neighbors to accept that.
And I have 2 additional points on that. I think we take that very seriously. We really spend a lot of time going through the functional tool because that is a big deal to determine that. And so the second thing that we're able to do is we can call the reporter back to gather more information if we're not sure. That's the only person we can consult with during the screening process besides maybe the county attorney. But any outside sources, that's the only person we can reach out to is that reporter. And sometimes just that helps gather information that we might not have.
Thank you.
If I
Thank you very
may,
much.
I just had a phone call here a couple months ago where a relative died, they had no children, and they were wondering, it was turned over because of the way they found their aunt. But there's privacy, must be privacy, because they couldn't get anything from anybody without hiring an attorney. Is that the way it works? Because they want to know why they found them in this way and nothing there. It's just like, okay, go hire an attorney. Well, for the expenses to get the reason why it happened, no one knows unless maybe it's a state or whoever there, right?
Yeah, data privacy is crucial in what we do, and whether the person is alive or is deceased, they still have a right to that data privacy. So we can't release that without a release of information from the individual who the information is about. So you can't even call about your family member to ask have they been reported on or not. We can't respond to any of those things. So yeah, and even with an attorney, they would need a court order to access our information.
Well, in this case, that person's not there any longer.
Right, they had deceased, they had no family. It was one of the nieces thought there might have been something there, so they reported it. And the way they found her, it's kind of like, well, a month later, they still haven't heard anything. They can't get any information from anybody. Well, go get a court order or whatever. It's kind of like, well, it seems like there's a brick wall here with this here.
The other option would be for them to become a personal representative of the estate, which is what would have to happen. We still would struggle with giving information, but when somebody's deceased and if they have no will and
no will.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Sarah, I'm curious here about, and I don't know exactly how to lay this out or the right way to do this question, so I'm just going to kind of throw this out. But how far does your jurisdiction run, or because just in the recent past couple of years, there's been legislation that's moved forward and has been put into state law protecting adults in nursing homes. Do you have the ability to have jurisdiction or insight, oversight, whatever, to those individuals who are in a nursing home or under specialized care, or are we just talking with those individuals who are still at home?
Yeah, so we have jurisdiction of the ones that are at home. Nursing homes are investigated by the state, by DHS or MDH. However, if it's an emergency report, that's where we have jurisdiction. We would go in and investigate the emergency if it meets that criteria, but the investigation above that would come from that state level.
Okay, so we're not talking, so when we were talking about Mark and that is outside of those individuals who are in nursing facilities.
So all the reports still will be filtered through Mark, and then that system filters them either to us or to MDH or DHS for screening. So they filter that through the Mark system.
So there's a significant number of reports within Morrison County that we don't see or don't show in our statistics. So anything around Horizon Health or Little Falls Care Center or group residential housing or adult foster care is all taken care of by the state of Minnesota, which has been challenging.
So what would happen in the case of, God forbid, but in the case of an incident at a nursing home that would be an emergent event, that you start the investigation? Is that exactly what you would do, is start it, then the next day it's turned over to a DHS?
Right, we would go in and provide for the immediate safety need. and we would coordinate right away with the state, saying we screen this in for emergency or we screen this out, let them know what we're doing, and then we could communicate back after that. But we'd have to make sure they're immediately safe.
Thank you.
So because the state is a little bit behind in adult protection, they just provided us actually a few months ago with this, these statistics from 2017. So from our 30 screened in reports, it just shows what allegations were, which ones were in which category. So 2 emotional abuse, 1 physical abuse, 6 fiduciary financial exploitations, 4 non-fiduciary financial exploitations, 6 caregiver neglect, and 11 self-neglect. Most of the reports that we receive and investigate are self-neglect reports. So. And this graph just shows of the investigations that we completed, what was our conclusion? Were we able to substantiate maltreatment? Did we find that it was inconclusive, false, investigation not possible? And so we were able to substantiate 12 in 2018. 6 were inconclusive, 24 were false, 4 not possible, 6 not a VA, and we still have 3 pending because we have so long to finish an investigation. Just a few updates in regards to adult protection. We do have a FTE of 0.4 for adult protection. That is split among 2 people, which means that they have another 0.8 FTE in another job. There isn't a real benchmark from the state on what a full FTE 1.0 looks like, so I reached out to my regional partners to determine, how they are measuring that. And they are saying about 20 active investigations is a full FTE. So for my investigators, that would be 4 active investigations at a time, which if we continue along this path might not be enough, but right now we're making it work and we're doing okay. So we have seen an increase in emergency protection reports. We received 46 in 2018 and 23 already in 2019. That takes a significant amount of time because when we receive a report like that, we're flagged through the MORC system and we have to get together immediately to screen and determine action. And so that takes a significant amount of time from the 4 of us that meet every day already. We have to then meet again and go over this again. So as you can tell, in 2019, we've already met quite often and actually responded to an emergency. So. Another measure that's new from the state is called an adult repeat maltreatment measure. So what they're doing is they are measuring the percentage of vulnerable adults who experience substantiated or inconclusive maltreatment, and they're making sure that they're not receiving, or we're not receiving a report of the same maltreatment within 6 months. So this year, they did not do a performance improvement plan with any of the counties. They just wanted everyone to see where they were at. For 2018, we were great. We were at 100%. So no issues with us.
So really what that means is that social services and/or public health are working good at making sure these individuals who have experienced maltreatment are getting the services necessary to remain safely in their home, or maybe moving to a facility that could better care for them. So it's an important measure that we don't want individuals to continue to hurt themselves or have somebody else hurt themselves.
So that concludes my report. If there's any other questions or comments.
Comments, gentlemen?
Pretty good.
If not, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a couple other requests for board actions under the social service report, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The first is a request for approving a resolution for our comprehensive reentry program. Our adult mental health initiative is again applying for innovation funding through Sourcewell. We are actually requesting a second year of funding, adjusting it a little bit for our staff in the jail, as well as trying to increase some technology between the jail, law enforcement, and the community with the Vitals app. But we're hoping to help sustain this program and that the legislature will begin to fund social workers in the jail through medical assistance. So the 6 counties in the adult mental health region are going to submit another application for innovation funding, and this requires a resolution of the county board for approval as a partner in this innovation funding.
Gentlemen, I'll ask for a motion and a second for the resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have I need a
I'll
second.
second it.
Any more discussion? Not?
The only thing I just might add is that we're not yet sure of the total requests because they're making some adjustments and looking at staff time and things like that. So we're not sure what the total request will be of Sourcewell yet, so.
Any more discussion? Not those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
And for Tabitha, I forgot to bring the signature page over for the commissioners. I hope you have one. Thank you.
Anything for you, Brad.
I know.
She's the best.
She's the best. She has to take care of me once in a while, so. The next request is to replace our collections officer who is retiring. I can't remember how long she's been here, 30-some years.
Long time.
So she is actually retiring. July 19th is her last day, and I'm requesting to replace her now because of the challenges in the child support unit with family medical leaves, that having a little crossover, which we don't normally do with our positions, but allowing this collections officer to help train in the systems that they use. And this is a pretty critical position in our office. You might recall Bonnie's first day a couple weeks ago, her first board meeting, we gave the collections report, and they collect on MA estates, out-of-home placements, detox claims, and so the position is fully funded through the work that they do, and actually even significantly beyond that. So.
And the only position that does that
and
work.
the only position that does
So it really
that.
is concentrated for that function.
Mr. Chair, I'll move on
I
this.
have a motion. I need a second. Any more discussion on the replacement of the collections officer and child support unit? If not, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. And the next request is to replace a developmental disability case manager in the adult unit. We have a staff who is moving on to hospice as kind of their last career move. So these caseloads are full, and this is also a position that is fully funded through waiver dollars and health plan dollars.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Oh, Mike seconded. Okay, any more discussion to approve the replacing development disability case manager? If not, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Mr. Chair, as you can see, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit, I'll take a moment now while Brad's here, but transition of staff that are aging out of the workforce. We have another one coming up with Public Works is happening. You know, it makes it busy, it makes it interesting. I'm going to have a report coming up and trying to get something consistent to kind of give you a big organizational picture too of turnover. So that's something that we expect, we keep talking about, and continues to be
It's starting
occurring.
to hit home.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a nice, kind word, aging out.
Wasn't this something we covered as part of that strategic plan?
Yep.
kind of thing? I thought I remember something.
Anything else, Brad, for social services?
Nothing else for social services. I'll call Cindy up here for, again, the theme being elderly and vulnerable adult. Public health is also an important part of ensuring the health and well-being of our older, aging population. And so Cindy's here to talk a little bit about what public health does around the older and aging population.
Morning,
Morning,
Cindy.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for listening to me at the end of a long board meeting. You can go to the next slide. So what we do in public health is we work with those over 65 that are in need of services, hoping that they don't get onto Sarah's adult protection program. There's 2 programs within case management for the over 65 population. One is alternative care and one is elderly waiver, and basically they need to meet the same criteria. It's about where they're at financially. Elderly waiver clients are people that meet the medical assistance criteria, so extremely low income, low assets. People on alternative care have the same physical needs, but they have a little bit more income, and this is the state's way of trying to divert them from nursing home placement by getting them services sooner, just because they're not absolutely at the low end of the income bracket, we can still provide services with the ultimate goal is to keep them out of the nursing home. So I won't read all the details, but they're very similar programs, but the financial status is what defines them. So the services that the case managers and case aides do, you can flip to the next slide, please. An assessment is done by a MinChoices assessor, and that determines their eligibility, not financially, but physical needs. Are they at risk of nursing home placement based on their ability to care for themselves and manage? So care coordinators and case managers coordinate the services, provide referral to our community partners, so that might be home care agencies, meal providers, assisted livings, et cetera. So we set those services up and then work with those providers to make sure that their services are actually meeting their needs. So they come onto our caseload after they're assessed by a MinChoices assessor, and we have determined the financial need. So sometimes we'll do a MinChoices assessment on somebody and find out they have $300,000 in the bank, so they don't really meet our criteria. But that person's not left out there high and dry. We still are a referral source, and we still connect them to the community partners that can help meet their needs. Just because they aren't financially eligible, they simply don't come onto our caseload for ongoing case management.
So, Mr. Chair, Cindy, if I may, so a person that's got money, whatever the XYZ money is, I don't care, but enough that they really don't qualify for public health assistance, but come to public health with a question or what should I do, you would actually take whomever those individuals are aside and say, yep, you're right, you don't qualify for public
health. You can actually go into their home and do a full MinChoices assessment. In fact, we're mandated to, because we can't determine who that is until we do the assessment. So we go out and we do the assessment. Sometimes we don't do the full 3-hour assessment because somewhere in the midst of it they say, no, I don't think I qualify. But so we still refer to whatever help they are in need of.
And then at the end of the day, to keep in record with vulnerable adult stuff, you then would look at me and you'd say, okay, Greg is qualified for something else. You probably want to do A, B, or C.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yep. And thank you again.
And we get a lot of calls. Sometimes it's simply a call coming in and we can refer them over the phone. Sometimes we have walk-ins, and sometimes somebody calls about their neighbor or their mom or someone who's in the hospital. We get referrals from all different resources, and we have to shake out where they fit. And if they end up needing it because of financial need, then they come onto our ongoing caseload.
I think stuff like this is so important to talk about because I absolutely do not believe that the general public has a grasp on this at all.
No, we get many, many
huge
calls from people that are overwhelmed and confused. Where do I start?
Thank you.
And that's what our role is to start them down the path to get services to ultimately prevent nursing home placement. Or if that be the end result, sometimes that's what ends up happening.
Thank you.
So once we get those folks onto care coordination or onto case management, so they've met criteria based on financial need, then they have the option, mostly, not everybody, but most of those folks get to choose between one of the 4 health plans. So enter managed care. So we have, go ahead, we have 3 categories of service of people that we take care of. So the community well are people that have signed on to a health plan, they're over 65, but they don't request services. Our role is preventive in nature. So the health plan pays case management care coordination staff to work with that individual with the ultimate goal to remain in the community safely, to make sure they're getting preventive care and that their needs are being met. The other group of folks is on nursing home care, they're on MA, and they're enrolled in a health plan. Again, we're trying to prevent hospitalizations, make sure that their needs are being met, that they have everything they need. Even if they're in the nursing home, they can be care coordinated, hired out by the health plan. And then those folks on the elderly waiver MA that are at home receiving services. Community-based services include assisted living. So that's still considered community-based. It's no longer community-based when they take that final step to the nursing home. But community-based assisted livings, in which Morrison County we're fortunate to have a very large supply of assisted living beds. And that's huge. We talked to a lot of people in other counties, and especially in the metro, there's a huge shortage
If
of
I may
assisted living.
interrupt, when you say there's a lot of beds available, can other counties come in and use these? Okay, boy, we got 30 beds available.
Absolutely. They can't be kept just for Morrison County residents. The assisted livings determine their admission criteria, who they will admit and what level of care they will provide. So that's really up to the provider, and yes, people cross county lines all the time with that. We no longer become financially responsible for them. That the county of location becomes financially.
So if somebody comes out of Hannibal County, they would be responsible for it?
Not in the over 65. We become financially responsible when they live here. For the over 65 population, it looks different for the unders.
Well, and part of it is, people want to move their parents or siblings closer to them for the care. So when you talk about this population, generally, they're not coming here just because there's a bed. They're coming here because family is closer to help care for them. And we are not the only county with facilities, but we are fortunate given some of the providers we have and the availability of those services. But when it comes to nursing home care, the state's responsible for all of the payments for nursing home care, so it doesn't matter where you are. We may have some responsibility around some support of that placement and or the financial paperwork, but in terms of financial responsibility, it's going to be with the state.
So if you can flip to the next slide, this just talks about the 4 health plans that we have. We work with Blue Cross, Medica, UCare, and until the end of the year, South Country. The next slide breaks that down by health plan. South Country does have over 160 clients out of our 440 plus members. So by the end of the year, we will have a big shuffle. We don't know what that's going to look like. DHS is going to definitely be directing that cart.
And just one other comment, this is one of the services that is going to be reprocured. So we know we're not going to have South Country, but there's also a chance we may not have Medica, UCare, or Blue Plus. These could all switch depending upon the RFPs and the health plans that bid on our counties. So
There's a small number there on the far right that's called fee for service. So those are folks that we did that initial assessment and determined that they met criteria, but they haven't gone on to a health plan. And there's just some real specific rules about that. And so they just never roll over to a health plan. It might be because they have a penalty period based on something they did with their finances. It might be because they have a very high income, but not enough of an income to meet their needs. So there's just a small number that always stay on that state plan and not roll over to a health plan. And that's really determined by the financial unit. The next slide just talks about our case management revenue versus budget for 2017 and 18. Clearly, we had an increase in revenue in 2018 for various reasons. We added a care coordinator that does almost exclusively the MinChoices assessments, so all of her random moment times, every time she gets selected for a random moment, she's almost always working on a case by being a full-time MinChoices assessor. So that's really increased our revenue there. The next slide just talks.
I do have to just congratulate Cindy. She's been working hard with her staff and Michelle on making sure they do a good job of billing and recouping. So she can give credit to other things, but she's done a great job in managing that and figuring out ways to really enhance the revenue recapturing part of the work they do. So thank you, Cindy.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, that was a goal. I mean, that was something that we all talked about needing to concentrate on, and so seeing those results is excellent.
We have an awesome partnership with our accounting team, and they don't leave a stone unturned. If there's a bill that didn't go through the first time, we're looking at it and making sure, is there another way to submit that to make sure we get paid, and maximizing our case manager's time. So,
and I think really emphasizing that with staff. I mean, that was something we talked about, that they just helping them recognize why this matters and how it impacts the overall organization and the funding in the department. So it's been a good approach.
And we're very transparent. We talk about where we're at in our staff meetings so that they understand what we're doing when we make a decision about a staffing, filling a position or not filling a position, and how we manage it. They need to be part of the equation. So
I appreciate that.
Case management expenses versus budget, you know, our expenses did go up because we included that extra Min Choices assessor, but at the end of the day, that resulted in more revenue, and that was our goal. Just in summary, you know, our caseload remains consistent. Right now, we're running between 450 and 440 and 450, fluctuates a little from month to month. The majority of those cases do roll over to managed care. We were anticipating Min Choices rollout of 2.0, the whole new Min Choices platform that the state has now pulled back on, up to 2 years delay, which was a huge surprise to us. We expected it a slight delay, but not a 2-year delay. And that was because the first launch in 2014 was pretty rocky, and IT at the state level, as we know, has not been real good. And so they're choosing not to roll out a product that's not ready. And we're grateful for that.
There you go.
We were anticipating a huge expense to train staff that will now be delayed.
Yeah.
So. Right now, we did talk about this. There's an adequate number of beds and choices. However, increasing numbers of retirees are changing that demographic. And labor shortages are probably the biggest challenge for our providers in this area. We have many providers that we call and say, can you take a homemaking client? Can you take a new home health aid client? And they'll have to say, let me check and see if I have enough staff to cover that client. That's getting a little bit dicey, you know, and there are times when they say, well, we could take that client, but we'll only be able to go do a bath once a week instead of twice. And
What are the qualifications for those home
they have to be a certified CNA to provide the bathing piece, the home health aid piece. If they just go in and do cleaning, cooking tasks, then they don't have to be certified. However, it's really hard for them to find people that want to do that level that's not certified.
And I'm assuming the wages aren't there either.
The wages aren't there, and unfortunately out here in the rural area, they have to pay them the windshield time to go from client to client. And that gets very expensive. Where in the metro, they can send a staff person to one high-rise apartment and they can stay there all day and have no driving expense and no windshield time. So when we say, I need you to see a patient in Motley in the morning and a patient in Piers in the afternoon, we have to account for all that in-between time. And it's very, very challenging. I just sat on a committee last week with the Central Minnesota Council on Aging, and that was the repeating theme around the table, and there was a lot of providers there that are struggling. Horizon Health used a lot of volunteers for things, and they went from 5 years ago, about 100 volunteers with about 35 people that needed those services, to the reverse, about 100 people that need the services and only 35 people to volunteer. So it's huge. And it's not going to, there's not a real relief on the horizon.
Anything else for them? I know you got more on public health.
No.
Cindy, thanks. Cindy, thank you.
Thank you.
The next thing under the public health, and maybe Cindy can sit here, I don't know if there'll be a lot of questions, but the 5 public health agencies in Region 5 are also applying for innovation funding, and this is really to support our work in maternal child health in a program called Mothers and Babies. And this particular grant, through, if we were successful, would help pay for staff time and trainers to come. We know that postpartum and prenatal mental health are important when it comes to preparing to be a parent. And so this really is a curriculum that will help support and educate our maternal child health nurses, working with those individuals. And so Cindy's really spearheaded this and found this program, and we think it'd be an awesome training curriculum for our nurses. So,
Gentlemen, I'll ask for a motion and a second.
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion, I need a second. Second. And this is to approve the resolution for the innovation funding through Sourcewell. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, just have a question. Unlike what we just got done talking about, this still, however, must be an income guideline somewhere to be on this, right?
Most of our folks that are on the maternal child health program, yes, meet the low income guideline, but we're not exclusive.
Okay.
So any expectant parent or new parent is eligible for our services.
Very good, thank you.
Any more discussion? Not, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
And then I just have a couple of food, beverage, and lodging licenses. One is a seasonal renewal for Ridge Ribbon Steakhouse in Motley. And then an addendum to the Urban Legend Tavern and Grill in Harding, which is moving from a small food license to a medium food license, so it's a little bit more costly, so they're increasing their food options.
Need a motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Not, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And I think that's all I have this morning.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Have a good day.
Looked like
Mr. Chair, the extension report, they were unable to schedule this morning, but did submit the monthly report, and
Anybody have any questions about it at all? Extension?
Nope, just met with them, so
Yep.
good.
All right.
Kathy's on her way, but maybe we could move to
How
the
about I
auditor
see someone
treasurer.
else in the audience there? Chelsea.
Chelsea making our day.
All right.
You ready?
Hello, Chelsea.
Good morning. All right. So I have a couple of things. The first thing here today, I am requesting for approval the resolution to allow the required tax forfeited properties to be submitted to DNR so that the county can proceed with having a tax forfeited land sale in 2019.
I'm asking for a motion and a second. I have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Not, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Mr. Chair, I just want to add on that I've appreciated Chelsea's approach to this. Tax forfeited property is something that I think as a county we can learn more about. We can figure out how to make sure we're staying active and on top of these properties and a little bit more actively managing them. And that's something Chelsea's identified as being a goal too. And she's been doing a good job on trying to get there, and we're kind of all learning together in terms of making sure that we're approaching this the best way possible to benefit the organization and get properties back on the tax roll as soon as we can. And so I've appreciated that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And this is the initial first step,
Yes.
if you will.
So for those,
So we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
for those properties to get back on the tax rolls, then they would have to go through sale and change hands.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So
And then-
this resolution allows us to submit these parcels to DNR. So on the resolution, the attached list with the parcels, there's, I believe, 10 that have DNR behind them, and the DNR has to review them and then they'll give us notification whether we can put those on a land sale or not.
Who sets the price on the DNR?
For the parcels, the
Yeah.
commissioners and I will sit down and set a price.
Oh, we look
So
forward to
depending
that.
on the district whose parcels are out here on this list, we'll be sitting down. I'll send an email out and we will set prices.
And I think we've seen some, typically in the past, I think it's been something that, number one, there's not a lot of forfeited properties, so it happens rarely. But homes or structures, that's been something that's been more common than maybe in the past. And so trying to deal with those and trying to get a handle on the quality and state of certain properties and making sure that they're safe and they're not causing any type of public hazard has been an interesting venture. And so just trying to be a little bit more engaged in that process if it's going to occur more is something we can look into and get better at. So
Like the cat house, right?
kind of, yeah, but maybe being a little bit more proactive if possible.
It's in the city. It's in the city, that's right. This is something we knew about this house out a lot. Not what Commissioner Blaine is thinking, like cats. This is real mammal cats. Keep going.
Moving on.
Okay, moving on.
Sorry, I should have maybe let that one go.
That's right. No about the cats.
I did not.
Okay, next I have some reports that we discussed at the beginning of the year that I would bring quarterly. So this next report is just our banks, cash, and investments as of March 31st, 2019. So again, it shows you the liquid revenue accounts that we have, our special accounts, and then our investments at the bottom. So since the beginning of the year until now, not a lot has happened. As far as moving money, we're down $2 million from January, but that's normal because we're taking taxes in now. So we were paying bills at the beginning of the year, and now tax statements are out, so we're collecting that money back in. It's a normal cycle that we go through.
I've moved a little bit of money around, cashed out 3 CDs, and moved some money from a bank, just to get better interest, so.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, I've been busy with maturing CDs, and then also, we've had some CDs that got called on. And what that means is we have some investments that are step-ups. So say it's a 3-year term and it starts at 2.5%, it can step up. And the end maturity may be 5%, but they normally don't go to maturity. And so since the feds have kind of thrown in the towel for raising rates in the last few weeks, I got a few phone calls stating that some of our investments got called on. Which is actually perfect timing because I wanted to move some of our investments to liquid since we have a large payment coming out for South Country Alliance. So it's been quite busy. And then I just wanted to note on this too, because this we deal with every day. The cash book is what this is. So just to give you an idea, in the last 4 weeks, since we sent out tax statements, we've collected $4 million, and our total collection in the spring is $24 million. So in the next three weeks, we'll collect $20 million. So,
Hopefully.
well, we're pretty good on collecting our tax
We're
dollars.
at 98% or something.
Yeah,
like that,
we are
right?
very high. Morrison County does a good job. Yep. So that is what I have.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
This is.
You know,
Always nice to look
we
good to
recognize this probably creates a little bit more work for you, but from our perspective and our fiduciary responsibility, I think it's imperative that we have this report on a quarterly basis. So we appreciate your efforts to do that and bring that to us and to explain the things as you have this morning. So, so kudos to you,
Thank you.
Chelsea.
Thank you. Next, I have just our first quarter interest report. So this shows our accounts and the investments that we, the interest that we've received on them. So we are doing quite well. And I have to say too, our investments that are maturing or coming due, what I have invested from when they mature, our rates have actually improved. So even though rates are not the greatest right now, they've improved from what we had.
Excellent.
So
Chelsea, do you know offhand what we budgeted for interest? Are we on target? Do you remember at all?
I have the
Okay,
total
I'm
in
sorry.
front of me.
I just thought
Sorry.
maybe you would know that. I didn't know for sure. I can't recall, but it looks,
Something for the future, if you can't do, it's more paper. Me, I always like, I tell a couple other boards this, I always like comparing it to last year. So like here, up
Sure.
to date, we have March, 121,000. It'd be interesting to see what we had in 2018.
sure. And I just, I looked at what I had proposed to you in January for December. I just have December's monthly interest, and it was $36,273. So you can see per month, we're doing quite well.
We're on true
Yeah.
target for that.
Yep. And then the next report is our monthly cash report, and this kind of is broken out into all of our funds. So this report, again, is something that I balance every month in our office to the cash report that we just went over with the investments. So I tie out the total amount for the current month with the cash report, and this is just our checks and balances. This is more liquid investment that we went over, and this is per fund, so.
Need a motion on that too? Accept
Nope.
that cash report?
Nope. And then next I have the warrants for approval.
That I know you need approval on. This will be a
Mr.
roll
Chair,
call.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I need a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? This is a roll call. Commissioner Lemire.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Commissioner Blaine.
Aye.
Commissioner Zelinski.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion carried.
Thank you.
thanks,
I want to say thanks to you guys too this morning for the employee appreciation breakfast. Thanks for chipping in and helping and showing your support because everybody appreciates it. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Chelsea served as a fine first-time committee planning member.
Perfect.
I was was nominated.
That's what you mean by first
But
timer.
clearly it was because we knew you would do
Yeah,
so well.
it was great. It was fun.
So-
Yeah, it was good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Chelsea, have a great week.
Thank you. You guys too.
The veterans here.
No, I'm going to do it.
Welcome, Kathy.
Oh.
Morning, Kathy.
There you go.
So this will be quick. It's basically it's a resolution, and I'll just capture a little bit about what the resolution is about and what it's regarding. The Region 5 VSOs, we have been getting together for the last probably last year, and trying to formulate a Region 5 yellow ribbon network. We do have one for Morrison County, and we do a great job in Morrison County. We have a very strong yellow ribbon network, but in the other counties, they're struggling. So they've been asking for help because what the yellow ribbon is, if for those who do not know, it's a group that helps veterans and their families. So a lot of things help veterans, but there's not a lot of things out there to help the families, especially while people are deployed and that kind of thing. So they serve helping people from anything from moving to snow shoveling to helping find resources for mental health, finances, a lot of different things, because we have a lot of things that people and families need out there. And so we're trying to improve upon that and help the community, because when you think about that also, there's military children that do not get a lot of resources and help as well. So they're looking for things to improve upon all of the counties within Region 5. So this is for going to Sourcewell and asking for a funding for this new yellow ribbon network for Region 5. And so that they're just asking for your partnership if you so desire. And so that is why I'm here, to represent our county in that part.
All right, Jeremiah, I need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion, I need a second.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Any more discussion on the resolution to establish support for seeking funding from Sourcewell?
Mr. Chair, I'm reading this, and if I'm understanding it correctly, we're seeking $45,700. No match, no commitment for something further from Morrison County. It is simply going to Sourcewell in an attempt to get that figure.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Yep.
Any more questions or comments? I have a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Have a good day, everybody.
That's it? Oh, that was easy. Have a good week. Let's see here. Public Works, Building Project, Administration.
Public Works.
Are you doing Public Works today? Oh, all right.
Very versatile.
You don't look like Steve at all.
Better hair.
You're better looking.
All right. I kind of mentioned earlier, we have a retirement in the maintenance tech area of Public Works. And so Steve wants to get moving on replacing that position. Like I mentioned, it's something that we're going to continue to see. We know that transition's happening with staff and how they're just by the demographics of our organization. And so yes, as we talk about strategic planning, as we look at that HR management and making sure we're recruiting and retaining employees that we have and are able to, and recruiting new ones to replace those that are aging out and leaving is important. And so this position has been looked at, and the routes and the staff numbers that we need have been analyzed and reanalyzed over the years. And Steve is confident that in order to maintain the operation that we have and the standards that we have, that we need to continue at this staff level. So we'd like to replace.
I'll ask for a motion and a second.
So move.
Second. Any more discussion? Not those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
All right. And Mike is on his way. And so we'll get a construction update, yes. I have a couple other things that I was hoping to ask if I could. Tabitha and I have been, well, they're just discussion items if I could. Tabitha and I have been working on trying to anticipate the upcoming move back home for board meetings. And one of the things that we would like to schedule, and I guess while she's here, talk a little bit about having a photographer come in. One thing that I think would be nice and is typical in many organizations is if we can have somebody come and do some nice nice pictures to be able to put in place photos of portraits and of the board as a whole. I've seen that in other organizations, and it really does look nice. It's something that hanging in or at or around the board table is good. It's nice to be able to use that in publications. It's nice to be able to have somebody come in and professionally do that. Tabitha did some shopping around, and we have somebody who will come in for quite reasonable cost and have access to those photos that we can then put in some different marketing materials. So if you're open to that, gentlemen, I'd like to get that scheduled and have somebody come in probably on a Tuesday. That would be a good idea. I will certainly let you know. We can maybe dress nice like you always do.
Why are you looking at me?
No, I'm not looking at you. I'm not
Well, she was, Randy. Yeah, she
I
was,
can tell that I
Randy.
have back. She's
Yeah, she'll like
So Jim, are you, so do you, again, help me out here with it. You want photos of the board to hang in the boardroom?
Yep, I want a professional, and I'd like a nice picture, portrait of the board, maybe individually and as a group, with just the 5 of you, maybe one with me included, if you don't mind, and we'll get that for future use. And maybe we'll throw out a.
So when would you like to schedule that?
Well, in a coming Tuesday. It'll depend upon the photographer, but I'll let you know ahead of time. I'll shoot you an email about when that would be scheduled. It would be following either a planning session or a board
Give
meeting.
Commissioner Wilson like a week's heads up so we can really look good.
Yeah. So
Mr.
maybe-
Chair, I would just like to say that, quite honestly, I'm surprised that boards have not done this as this is just the way it is
Yeah.
in the past in Morrison County. Quite honestly, I've thought of this several different times. And truly, and you hit it on the head, you go to another county, very often, that's the way it is. It's there. And probably in more places than just a boardroom. But it's a file photograph at the same time also, to where, God forbid, something happens, there is a photograph of you as your job. I fully support that.
I'm assuming we can use that independent photo for our
I
card thing.
yes, for your ID badge, sure.
Are you guys okay with
We can
that?
Photoshop too,
All right,
Randy.
so it'd be after you threw me off there.
Yes, you could.
Yeah, go for it. They'll let us know so you can get your
She wants to
tattoo
put my
done
face on
before.
a mule.
Oh, no. Or even in May, yeah, so if we could have it so it's.
Before some board or planning session.
Yes, you'll be hearing from us, and if there's anything that the photographer
Board.
suggests in terms of colors, I will let you know. Because I know you would rather have me tell you what to
Absolutely, I
wear.
love it.
So, anyway, more to come from that, but thank you for being supportive. I do think that that's something that
Are you okay now, Commissioner Lemire?
would add a nice touch.
So wear
All
your
right.
skinny jeans.
Well, you can't sit out. You won't be in the
This will be taken here.
Again, we're going to have the professional maybe give us some advice on how and where to do that, and I will be in touch with that. I just didn't want to schedule something without your
My first opinion is better to have it over there.
Why is this taking so long,
once the
Randy?
boardroom, yep, exactly, once that board table is done, but if we incorporate that, or if we do before or after, what, but yeah,
Shop us in the board.
yeah, like what, you're right, that's what we were talking about, we did talk about waiting until the board table is done, sorry.
It'll probably be June before.
It probably would be, yes.
Fine.
And
I
then we
love
were,
it.
So is there, like in our intranet or whatever, is there a file or a folder that lists all the employees of Morrison County and their photo? The
Yep.
directory, yeah, directory is the correct.
oh, not the photo?
We're working on
Oh,
that.
we're working on getting
We
it.
don't have that.
Our old intranet site did, but this one is still had work in progress.
Will we ever do that? Is that something that, so that we know who, we can put a face with a name?
We had one, and when we switched over to the new intranet, it didn't come with it as far as, it wasn't a part of it, so it's something else we have to get, we have to build it. And so Amy's been working on that amongst all of her other tasks. So it's something that we are looking to
And
do.
the intranet does have, it is accessible and there's a login, and maybe it would be good to remind you again on how to get that so you have the county news if you're not, if you maybe
Well, I
forgot.
figured it was something within our own network and not necessarily public, out on the
Yeah,
public.
but if that's something you want to be reminded of on how to access it, because it's a SharePoint, which is a Microsoft Office tool that maybe I won't call you out, but.
I just don't access it very often
Okay.
or whatever to know that whether that's there or
Yeah,
not.
and if you need a reminder on how to access that, certainly let
I
Tabitha
wouldn't mind
know.
it. I just got internet at my house, so.
You just got internet at your house
Satellite?
instead of a
No,
hotspot?
I actually got it wired into my house
Oh,
for the first time ever.
good for you.
Feel like that.
Yeah.
For you. All right, I will get that scheduled. Tabitha and I are also talking about trying to organize some type of, I don't know, event, or I don't know if event is the right word, but kind of an open house for when we are able to begin our board meetings back, and maybe invite staff
absolutely.
down to during that first board meeting to be able to recognize and kind of celebrate as a group the space being complete and it being open to the public again. So more to come on that. But June is what we're hoping for. That second board meeting in June would be our goal, to have the first live up and running board meeting back at the facility. Not ready to do that yet.
Anything else, Administrator?
Nope, I'm still trying to kill time for Mike Philippi
We
to.
can do a committee reports.
All right.
We can start him, and then if he comes in, we'll interrupt.
So,
let's
Mr.
start
Chair, excuse me for 1 second. You're looking at probably the 18th of June.
That is our goal. We should be able to be in according to the schedules now, but again, we can maybe press and with Mike when he shows up, but that should be the meeting that it would work. Whether the planning session the week before would be a trial run and kind of to see where it goes, I don't know for sure, but that would be the first board meeting is my anticipation.
What dates are we looking at?
April 28th through May 11th.
How about we start with Commissioner Jelinski?
Absolutely. Starting on the 28th.
8th of May, or April.
The 28th of April, I'll be leaving and I'll be at the Public Safety Communications Conference starting Sunday afternoon. That goes through Wednesday, the 1st of May,
And where is that?
and that's in St. Cloud. And I will be there for that entire time. Thus, I will miss our planning meeting on Tuesday, the 30th. I will miss the gathering at Public Works at noon
On the 3rd?
on the 30th.
Is that April 30th?
On Wednesday, the 1st, right after that conference is done, I will chair the Emergency Services Board Executive Committee meeting at the City of St. Cloud. That date, there is also a planning and zoning schooling in Alexandria that I will miss because of all that stuff. On the 2nd of May, got a legislative committee conference call at 10 o'clock in the morning. On the 3rd at 8:30 in the morning, there's a Public Works planning meeting at Public Works. On May 7th at 9 o'clock in the morning, we have a board meeting. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, we have a budget meeting. And at 7 o'clock that evening, there's a Board of Adjustments meeting. I have no idea what, if anything, that I'll be doing. However, on the 8th of May is the Day of Caring. On the 9th of May at 6 o'clock in the evening, I've got a Trails meeting at the Randall Fire Hall. On the 10th, I'm not positive that I'll attend this or not, but there's an armor rack meeting in Alexandria. I think there was one more thing. No, I can't make that either. Wasn't there a special planning and zoning meeting, or?
That's on Monday. The 29th, Planning Commission at 7.
Planning Commission at 7 o'clock, which I will not be attending due to that, being at that radio conference. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, and then we'll quit for that. We have some special guests here for a project building update.
Morning, men.
Good morning.
Morning, gentlemen.
I was only harassing Mike, Pete. I didn't know that I should have summoned you too.
I got that from you.
He was running. I told him to run. Oh.
Good yourself. Good.
I don't think he heard you, or he probably would have
See
reacted.
here, I got this one here from you.
Morning, Smiley.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you very kindly.
That must be a screw up.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think it
so
is.
delete it.
Good morning, members of the board. Mr. Chair, I've just handed out a quick budget to kind of give you a rundown of kind of where the project sits. Only thing I'd like to highlight is the contingency line item. Just as a reminder, if you are looking through that budget line, that encompasses the camera upgrade at this point in the jail project, along with some of the boardroom enhancements. But outside of that, that's why it's kind of sitting where it's at currently. And we kind of reviewed that in one of our work sessions that we had earlier. Outside of that, we're definitely over the halfway point, probably 2/3 of the money spent on the project, which makes sense considering we got the roofs on last summer and all the major mechanical pieces installed in the project. So with that, I can answer any questions anybody has on the budget. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Mike for a little bit of schedule update.
Help me out. How much do we have left in the contingency here?
Right now, currently, there's it's actually minus 59,000.
That's what I was looking at.
But if you remember back, we had 205,000 that went to the camera upgrade in the jail project that we house there currently. We needed to do that as a change order through Holden Electric in order to maintain the insurance and warranties and things of that nature. Construction-wise, like I said, with the balance remaining, you're a little over 200,000 in that line item if you pull out the jail cameras and the AV system.
So where's that negative 59,000 coming from when it's not coming from the contingency?
It's
It is.
yeah.
It
But
is.
that's kind of where those two are.
I know.
So it was a placeholder in the budget right now that, depending upon whether or not you want to fund it from a different department, I know Sean had some money potentially set aside and/or the surplus that we had in the project budget, that little over $2 million we had early on. So
As you recall, the bond issue that we had is higher than what the project cost is going to be. So we were talking about some different items that were still on the radar. If you remember when we first initially talked about the project, there were many other things that were on the overall radar to address that we know we're going to have to address that were scaled back from in that original proposal because the original estimates were higher than what we knew we had available. Well, the bids actually came in lower, and so we're looking at whether or not it makes sense financially and for the layout of the building and the needs that we have in the complex to look at those things now, knowing that those dollars are available and we are going to have to spend money to address some of those concerns. And so you as a board with the building committee have talked about making sure we're being smart with those investments and doing things now if they make sense. And one of those was that camera upgrade. And so right now we're putting it in the contingency fund because it can run through the project. We will be using those bond proceed dollars to fund some of that.
Sounds good.
Mike?
Good morning.
Morning.
Just to give you a rundown of kind of where we're at, we're probably 3/4 of the way done with the carpet on the second phase, and that's going to be wrapped up next week. We're going to be going through doing the air balancing next week. Then we'll follow up with a punch list at the end of next week, cleaning, and then furniture is being delivered on the 20th of May. And I believe they have about a week and a half of install time, and then staff will start to move after that. So
we're going to meet soon as a group of maintenance and admin, social service leadership to talk a little bit about those transitions, IT, to talk about the transitions and the moving. We're moving a bigger bulk of staff. And so we want to make sure that we're coordinated, and this is not really Mike's deal, but he's certainly, you're in charge of furniture, I think, so I think it'll work. But we'll meet and we'll talk a little bit about that transition, how we're going to work that, any impacts, if at all, for customer flow and such. And remember that the front office of social services is going to occupy where we are right now in administration. So coordinating that and when there's that gap, and whether or not we need to utilize some weekend time when there are no customers, or whether we, how to plan all of that. We want to make sure we're prepared and we're ready. So we're going to meet and talk about that soon and set out a schedule. With that many staff changing and moving, it'll take a little bit more coordination than it has in the first phase. So
if you want to take a walk through, stop down and get me, and we can take a walk through and take a look at the area.
Carpet. If I was maybe seeing thing, were they putting in those individually? Is that how it was?
Yes.
And why did they do that versus coming in, let's roll out 100, 200 foot?
I know with this carpet allows you the option to actually replace pieces,
right,
instead of replacing a large section of it. In some areas, if it does get worn down the corridor or at a certain path area of your furniture and stuff, you can actually swap the tiles around. So it wears more evenly, but it's for the replacement. So yeah.
Do we, and where I'm going with this, you have these replacements. Obviously, sometimes manufacturers quit making things that it doesn't match. So are we going to keep 100 square feet or 200 somewhere?
There's attic stock that gets left on the job. It's a certain percentage. I'm not sure what that is right offhand, but there is attic stock, and that goes for ceiling tiles and all sorts of like that. It'll be floor tile, the ceramic tiles, and all sorts like that. So.
Good information. Thank you.
The exterior work, roof, all that stuff is basically done. So I'm just wondering, does with this Highway 27 project that's going on, does this create any other headaches for you with contractors and having enough space and logistics or whatever? You guys can manage that.
Yeah, it'll be just fine. The roofing work where they're out with the big equipment. The only thing we will have outside this summer is the glass link between the old courthouse and the 60s building, which will come down. But that's kind of localized in one area. So otherwise, everybody else, we've been coming out the east side over there using the local lot right there. And this next phase will be the same way. Everything will come right in and out of that, right across the alley, actually. So. Yeah.
And we're going to continue to maintain that lot as construction staging and construction parking lot. We did communicate that out to staff, and we'll continue to remind them of that, just for that reason, to continue to allow that operation to go.
And Deb said, rumor has it that the board will probably be able to go in there sometime in June.
Yep.
Thanks.
Today.
That was maybe not as confident as I would like.
I was thinking what the date was today, so I was thinking today's May, and I was like,
You got hesitant, like,
yeah.
look at you throwing it.
We'll talk about that later.
They probably won't mount the screens and stuff in the actual boardroom until we go through and clean and they're ready to put furniture in at that point, because there'll be clean items, so the
It was
screens and
mid
stuff
to
will
late
go in.
June, Mike. I wasn't promising the world there, but.
No, that's where the stuff is gonna go in, once the building is cleaned and you're
On
moved
record
in,
that
so.
she said, mid to late June.
Also
Anything
told.
else, gentlemen?
I thought that was unique. I took a tour this morning and you talked about carpet, and I never thought of that, but he said you can do the little rooms with that little carpet and put the doors and stuff back on where you don't have to wait to roll out the whole building at one time. And,
You
and
end
that
up with
makes
a
a
lot
big,
less scratches with the rolls of
that makes
carpet,
a
you know,
big
you end up
difference.
against the walls and against the doors, and you have to pull the doors off to put it in, and this way you can go ahead and do all that stuff, and then you're not rolling carpet up against, all your finished items too, so.
Yeah, it looks nice.
looks very nice.
I'm anxious, and I think it'll be really nice when that phase is done, and we'll start the next one. And what do you anticipate the next phase to take? A little less, because we've done some of the prep work, but.
Yeah, we're probably looking sometime in December to be done with that, towards the end of that, so.
Good.
Awesomeness.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for the update.
Thanks for hustling.
Good job. All right, we go back to committee reports. How about Commissioner Lemire? The 11th or the
30th, HRA, 1:30 PM. Did you do Public Works did Jeff do public works
He's
planning?
mentioned it, but I don't have it on
On
my.
the 3rd?
That was
at
on the
8:30?
3rd, right, yeah.
The T-SWAC's gonna be at Public Works at 8:30, that's what
It's not T-Swag.
I know. I know,
It's
it's
not
not
Okay.
T-SWAC.
Public health on the 1st, 5 PM. And Jeff did all my other stuff.
You good?
Yep.
All right, Commissioner Blaine.
On the 30th, there is a South Country Health Alliance Finance Committee meeting
I'll be able to attend that too.
at
Commissioner
1,
Blaine.
so, and if, since Deb's gonna be there, then I probably won't have to listen in on that. I have a compliance meeting at 8 o'clock at South Country Health Alliance, and then our joint powers meeting from 9 to noon on, and that is on the 2nd, on Thursday, the 2nd of May. Morrison Colorado Community Health Board meeting on Wednesday, May 8th at 3 p.m. I have the mock car crash on the 9th. I've got that on my calendar at 7 to 8 o'clock a.m. And so we'll deal with this as it comes along and as we get more information about that. Other than that, I think everything else was covered.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Wilson.
I've just got on the 2nd, CMCOA Advisory Committee, that's Council of Aging, at 10 o'clock. Other than that, I'm covered.
All right, I'm covered, other than I will be at the City of Royalton at 7 o'clock for their meeting. I was asked to come there, so on the 7th, Tuesday.
That's what I have.
Mr.
Chair Tabitha, was there a department head meeting on the 8th?
Yeah, that seems like
Dave Caring is what we're going to participate in. More information to come on that. I had sent in, I think I sent you an email. I don't know if I copied you, but I don't have the specifics on where to report and what to do with that, but I will let you know. She indicated that that's forthcoming.
Jeff, what time is that Trails?
Trails is at 6.
6.
And then, Mr. Chair, I usually like to let you know too that April, May time brings those 3rd grade tours that we do at the Government Center. And so that'll happen in the afternoon of the 25th, 26th, and the 1st and 2nd. You're always welcome. They're all at 1 p.m. I conduct those typically, and I know Tabitha really wants to if I'm not in the office, or maybe not, but she would be a fine fill-in if for some reason it doesn't work, but we have that of April the 25th, 26th, the 1st and 2nd.
More than welcome to come and help chaperone from the school to here if you like, get back.
Well, you're not, you know, there's no obligation or anything, but if you happen to be around, you're more than welcome to join and see. They, for some reason, end the tours without necessarily being that enthralled with county administration, but they do enjoy visiting the courtrooms typically, and our judges have been good about working with me on
Enjoy
that.
the judge's chair.
Well, they don't sit in it, but, and they also enjoy the sheriff's office is nice to see too.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
What's that airport hearing about tomorrow? Do you remember?
I don't know the specifics of that. Is it regarding their ordinance and land use?
Public hearing.
I think so.
Yeah, it's here.
Well, it's,
I'm reading that from the council chamber. Is what it
Yep.
says.
I don't have the specific detail on that, but I think it's probably their land use in the hearing for their, the runway.
So it's,
Anything else, Deb?
That's where we're kind of required for that though, right?
What's that?
There's that process that we have to go through, I'd imagine. I can find out from you, for you, I'm not certain offhand. It's when tomorrow night?
Will you email us? about that?
Yep, I think maybe that was on a to-do list at some point in time that I'm coming up with here, and I may have failed.
Okay.
all right.
That's it? Motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Need a second?
Second.
Three of you said it.
Go ahead, give it to Mike.
You have that, the second? All right. Any more discussion? Not those in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion adjourned. We are meeting adjourned at 12:05.